We're going to get started. This is the February 21st, 2023 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeal and Zoning. Present are Allison Grass, Robin Richards, not yet Bill Goodman Jr., Jackie McKay, myself, the Chair, John Bennett. Present from the planning staff are Lee Batchelor, Lee Ashby, and John Comment. These meetings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. Then we close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. First, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present to qualify to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, there are extraordinary, exceptional conditions pertaining to a particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance, a particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. At this time, there are no deferrals. All items in the agenda will be heard this evening. To see, it looks like we have a large crowd tonight, so anybody who's here to speak, I'll swear you in now. You can raise your right hand and repeat after me, just signify by saying I do the following statement. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, the truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is item A1, review of the minutes of the February 7th, 2023 board meeting. Have all the board members received copies of the minutes? Approval. By Ms. Grass. Second by Ms. Wilson. All those in favor say, signify by saying aye.
Aye. I did not vote. I was not.
McKay abstains. The vote carries 4-1. I'm sorry, 4-0. Next item on the agenda is item A2, 1334 Rutledge Avenue, Garden Kiwa, TMS number 464-14-00024. Request variance from section 54-317 to allow restaurant use with 480 square feet of inside patron use area, providing 2 off-street parking spaces, 5 spaces required, zoned general business. The owner is Flipside SC LLC. The applicant is John Sullivan S. Studio LLC. Mr. Batchelor.
So this is an application concerning this property at the northern end of Rutledge Avenue. It is shown here on the zoning map. And let me just turn my cursor on so this is the property right here. So this is a residential structure and it's always been used as a residential use as far as I can tell. And the building next door is a residential structure that's used that way. The application is to convert this house into a restaurant use. The zoning is general business. And you can see from this zoning map that the properties on this east side of Rutledge Avenue are zoned general business. Across Rutledge Avenue is a residential zoning district and residential use. And the yellow properties on this map indicate residential zoning areas as well. So this is the application and material that was submitted by the applicant. Again, the zoning map. And I'm just going to run through the applicant slides. The other thing you'll see is this is a neighborhood over here. This is called the Garden neighborhood. And it's a small community, and it is directly accessible from Rutledge Avenue and Portland Avenue right there. This is a photo of the house in question, and the side of the house. This is Portland Avenue. These are materials submitted with the application. So Portland Avenue, looking just beyond Rutledge towards the east, and you can see the neighborhood beyond the overpass. This is north, so that's the beginning of the ramp where you access Interstate 26. Another view of the overpass, the backyard of 1334 Rutledge Avenue. Another view of the underpass. These are photos of the interior of the house, and then this is a site plan and floor plan showing the property, Rutledge Avenue, Portland Avenue, the front yard, the interior dining spaces and kitchen and bar spaces, and then a small little parking area, which is really only counts as 2 parking spaces off of Portland. And the size of the square footage of patron area on the inside is what indicates the 5 spaces are required based on our requirements. Another site plan. This is not what we would advocate for because we don't want to encourage people to park under the Interstate 26 overpass. That parking is not technically allowed, it's my understanding, and we would rather not encourage people to park under there. I know people do it, but we don't think that's a good idea. And hopefully someday it will be included with other kinds of public uses. But and then another parking layout, which again uses the DOT property for access. So not one we would ever recognize. And this is a letter of support that they submitted from the owner of the house to the south. So he lives at 1332 Rutledge Avenue. I can't use the name, but so these are my photographs. So, so my position on this is not position for this request. The applicants have to seek the variance because they are not able to satisfy the off-street parking requirements on site, and I don't feel the property qualifies for a special exception to not provide parking. So they have to seek a variance, and the variance includes the four-part variance test. So even if you make it through the first two parts of the property, extraordinary and exceptional conditions, you're still left with the second, with the third and fourth part, which have to do with the whether granting the variance will not granting the variance will unreasonably restrict or effectively prohibit the use of the property. And to that, I would say no, that's not the case. It's a residence, it's been used that way. It could also be converted into an office use and not require the parking that the restaurant does. And the other thing about parking for restaurant uses is whether this applicant intends to do something that's going to generate a lot of parking demands or not, I don't know, but the use, the approval runs with the property, so it's not about applicant, it's about the use. And restaurant uses in general require a lot more parking than the city requirements require. And I know that from plenty of experience over the years. And one of the problems with overflow parking from restaurant uses going into neighborhoods. And so I'm concerned with this particular property because on Rutledge Avenue or this north end, there's no on-street parking on either side of the street. And so here's Rutledge Avenue. No on-street parking is permitted on either side of the street for several blocks. Heading south, looking north, there's no on-street parking. And of course, you're getting into the ramp that lead from and to Interstate 26. So that's not possible. And then you look down Portland Avenue, and you're looking at a neighborhood on the other side of that overpass. And this is a view from that neighborhood back towards Rutledge Avenue. These streets aren't really meant for on-street parking. I know residents do park there, but that's for residents and not for potentially overflow parking from restaurant use. And so my feeling is that they don't meet the third part of the variance test, that they have a reason to use the property, even if it's not office. And the final part of this is that I think granting this variance would impact the adjoining areas, specifically that neighborhood to the east. And so for those reasons, I think it's not a good idea to approve this variance application.
So the city recommends denial. Are there any people here who wish to speak either for or in opposition to this application?
Excuse me, I would just ask if you could please speak a little bit louder.
Yes, of
That
course.
would be
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank
Is there
you.
anyone present who wishes to speak either for or in opposition to this application?
I'll speak.
In opposition?
No, the opposition, yes.
Okay, great. You'll have a moment in just a second. We're going to hear from the applicant first, if they're here to speak on behalf. Yes. Please state your name.
Hi, I'm John Sullivan with SR Studio, representing the applicant. The applicant's also here, Dr. Kirsten and Steve later. So just to go over what he said. So yeah, you can see on the zoning map there that this is kind of on the corner. This part of the neighborhood was cut off in 26 with the buildings there. You know, not a good thing for the neighborhood, but it is very isolated from the neighborhood, over 200 feet from the site under an underpass to the first house. And the zone was changed, the zone to commercial. Commercial makes sense simply because it's a little isolated block right there. And you can see when they did do this, they cut off the back of the property. So it was kind of cut off back there. We're not planning to bulldoze the house, add on to the house. It's the exact same house, just a very small restaurant use. It's 480 square feet of patron use area. There's people seating for 38 plus bar seating for 6. So it's not a huge traffic generator, and it's not space for that. It's more on the beat, more of a neighborhood spot. People can come, grab a drink, have a sandwich, not looking for late night use. But because of that 480, as Lee said, restaurant use parking, we're hoping people walk here. There's a bus stop right in front. It's one reason why we can't get parking in front of the building. There's a bus stop there. So I don't know, can you go forward? So that's the house. It's going to be fixed up, but stay as is with a couple parking spaces in the back. As Lee, and again, that's the street down there. So you can see how, while there is a neighborhood back there, every table could have a car there. It's parked on the side of the road, which Lee may not say this, but it is allowable. And before you reach the so you cannot imagine people parking 250 feet away to come to this little small restaurant. It's not seen that. So we'll people in the neighborhood would walk here, pull bike here, rather than that. Continue going forward. So as we said, this is a very noisy corner. There was an arm ramp. I don't call it an arm ramp, but it's kind of an S-shaped road that cuts across the street that goes to the interstate. So residential, while it may have been there before, would be a terrible spot for residents. The noise, the litter, everything else. It's just not that. It's more for properly zoned as this commercial use. Can you go forward? As you can see, that's the back of the property. The fence is kind of the end of the property. So I know Lee says right now, you're not supposed to park under there. People already park under there now. There is litter, everything else. Hope is that with a use in the corner, that it would be cleaned up and the applicant would take more responsibility for this corner and make it clean because he wants to do the area with nice. Can you go forward? Again, that's just looking directly, what is directly behind this use. As you can see, it's 200 feet of underpass before you get to the neighborhood. The one more forward, that's the inside, as you see by that. So you see, we're using about half of the existing building for the dining space. The other half is toilet, back house area. We can fit 4 of the 5 cars on the site, but we can't have double stack. But as I said, employees will have places to park. Ideally, employees will take the 2. There'll be 2 spaces for customers and then a couple more streets. That's what we all that can go there. Go to the next slide. So this is what I was trying to show. Is not to use the DOT space, but if the property line was like it was existing, or the back part of the property was annexed by the DOT, the 5 spots couldn't fit on the back of the site. That hashed area is what was taken away when they did the interstate. So without that hardship of losing that area for the DOT, the lot as it originally was could fit the 5 spaces. Then this next. The next one we're showing is the DOT allowed us to not park in there, but at least access in and out. We could get the 5 spots, and that's something we could try to work with DOT if that's allowed, to allow the 5 spots on there without parking under the interstate, just going in and out egress. And then that'll be the next slide. That's just kind of showing the overview. Yeah, kind of showing, like I said, yeah, from the corner closest to the residential lot, yeah, so it's 256 feet to the closest residential lot from that area. So I do think that we do meet the that it is an extraordinary and exceptional conditions by this lot. As you can see, So some lots have been cut, this entire block. This property here is the only one that's really been truncated. The property below has a small corner on, the one below that wasn't affected at all. So this is, has affected this lot more than its neighbors. And as far as leads for part 3, we said you could do an office there, but it's really not a good site for an office. There's a reason why offices in that area of Rutledge have failed, because you need some traffic flow. Just an office sitting by itself will have a trouble that a restaurant does. The restaurant can draw from the neighborhood. That's the plan more than anything else. And again, I'm saying I don't think the effect will be a substantial detriment. The neighbor next door doesn't think it's going to be a detriment to him, and he's right next door versus something way down the street.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Anybody else wish to speak on behalf of the application?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add. I'm Doug Hickerson.
Yeah, would you come up and state your name, and are you the owner of the property?
Yes. So one item that isn't in this because we confirmed from last week, there are 16 letters of support in the neighborhood as well. That we've gotten since then. So not just the neighbor next door. The other part of that is it's a small cafe. It's not intended for legal use. It is not intended for big alcohol use. It is not intended for a lot of parking. So, and the other part where he was talking about with the bus stop, that's why it's called the last stop. We're going to do it in a theme. It's like the old Greyhound Cafe. Where you walk in, you sit at the cafe, you have some breakfast, and you wait for the Greyhound bus. So in that, I think it does bring a lot to the community that is there. He's talking about the residential very far removed from that. It is. You have to go through the overpass. The overpass is a mess. It is trash. There's 20 vehicles there a day anyway. So the 2-spot variance that we're looking for doesn't even get to where the 3-spot, doesn't even get to where the overpass comes all the way down. It's just where the DOT section begins. So if you go, you don't need to go back to the picture, but where you saw that brush line, that's where the DOT line is. There's still 20 feet or so before you're at the overpass. So, long story short is, I don't think it's going to be the detriment that you expect to the neighborhood in terms of parking, because it's not something that wants 40 cars being in there. And there's already 10 cars there per day, and tons of trash over there, and we will clean up.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak on behalf of the application? We'll now hear from, yes.
I might have missed this, so I just wanted to clarify. When did you say it was constructed? And how long has it been used as a residence?
Do not know. Tax records in that area are not the best. It's been vacant for many years.
I think, it wasn't vacant.
The last few years.
Yeah. She's right. It wasn't vacant when I bought it. I bought it in November of 21. And it took me 5 months to paying tenants out of there. That's why the immediate neighbor, Benjamin, was so for it, because those tenants were so aggressively dangerous to the neighborhood, as he told me. So it took me 5 months just to get that part. But I think it's a 50. I mean, I can certainly email you back. I think it's 54, 58.
For a long time, it's been used as a residence. Thank you.
Oh, when it was been, yeah. It's been zone general business.
But again, when it was built, 26 wasn't there.
Right.
The neighborhood was knitted together. Once 26 cut through there, it kind of changes. That's why some was your business, not residential.
Thank you.
It's actually closer in walking steps outside of Ben's house next to me to commercial than it is the next house under the overpass. Like the lab is there and then the RCC and stuff. So,
You mentioned 38 seating tables and 6 or 40.
44 seats. And there's that's really that all in the area. 480 square feet of seats.
I apologize, I missed your last name.
Hickerson.
Hickerson, thank you. All right, we'll now hear from anyone in, I'm sorry, before we go on, anybody else in favor of the application here? Thought I might have seen a hand go up. Okay. We'll now hear from anyone who is opposed.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Winful, and I live about 4 doors down from this proposed site. I'd like to start off by saying, my family has been in the neighborhood for over 50 years. And there has always been someone in that house that they decided to renovate as a restaurant. There are at least 10 of the residents that's in that area that's 65 years of age or more. And we enjoy our peace. I hear him say that there is a bus stop right in front of the residence. How many people go to a bar on a bus? Not many, if any. So I don't think those are going to be the people coming to this restaurant. I also hear him say that there are 40 seats in the bar. How many times we have gone to a bar that's overloaded, the capacity is just flowing over. We expect this in our neighborhood. We already have a problem. We have 2 restaurants that's maybe 2 blocks away on Mount Pleasant and Rutledge Avenue. Next to that restaurant is another restaurant. My house is in the middle of Rutledge and King Street, halfway. If we go further down to the right toward King Street, there's also a bar there. So occasionally, not much now, but occasionally there are cars that takes up the residents' parking spaces. So we would just like to come home and be able to park in front of our door and not have to go back down to the corner to find out who's taking our parking space or who's parking in front of our residents. No, I don't think it's going to be an easy ride with this new restaurant on the corner. It doesn't need to be there. There's always been a residential area. We enjoy our peace. We don't want another some drunken people or people walking down the street. We have to look both ways and sideways because all these drunks are coming from the bar. You know, he says no drinking. Who has a bar where people do not drink? It's not reasonable. It's not feasible. I am totally against it. Most of my neighbors are against this. Now, I heard him say that we have one neighbor that's right next to. And if you look at where this neighbor is and where this house is that they're trying to make into a bar, it's close. There's no way without some type of persuasion that this guy could agree that it's a good thing. I mean, his house is like as close as this paper is to this telephone. It's just that close. So, I mean, and where would they park? They have a small driveway, so they have a visitor. Where would that person park? It's just totally outrageous to bring in another bar in a residential area where we are now enjoying our peace. Thank you.
Any questions?
Whereabouts is your house here?
It's about 4 doors down. It's
On Rutledge.
it's on Court.
On Court.
So, and they're going to be on the corner of Cortland and Rutledge. It's on Rutledge, right? It's to the right, and it's right past the underpass. And he says now that there are trash. Well, we have no control of that. The city needs to come and clean up whatever trash. But there's not 20 cars on that road. There's not 10 cars on that road every day. That's a bit of exaggeration, isn't it?
Mr. Sullivan, oh, I'm sorry, are there others?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Lisa Green. My address is 2120 Mossford Avenue. And my opposition is the same as what Teresa stated. It's a quiet neighborhood. I lived in that neighborhood. I am 51 years old. We never had so much traffic and, like you stated, trash, in our area. My neighbors always clean up under that neighborhood, but they've gotten older, so they don't do it. They used to cut the grass. We used to do a lot of the things to maintain underneath the bridge. We could never get SCDOT to come and do their job, maintain underneath that overpass. But I find it very interesting that they were able to communicate with SCDOT when we've been trying to communicate with SCDOT. So, I'm in opposition of this particular restaurant. We already have people, that come through our neighborhood, cut through, pass through our neighborhood as it is, that we never used to pass through. We also have a lot of, foot traffic that we're not used to, and like she stated earlier, that we have a lot of elderly people in our neighborhood, and it just creates an unsafe environment. And I'm not saying that it can't be some type of business, like they stated, that is zoned general business. However, it used to be zoned like industrial, if I'm not mistaken. And they changed it to, I think, general business back in maybe 2000, maybe 5 or 10, something like that, I can't remember. But the point of the matter is, as far as the parking, we have a hair salon on Montford Avenue, okay? We had a mortgage company on Montford and Rockledge Avenue, a music studio that's on our street. We have a trailer that should not be there in the first place. Now, I want to speak to the actual, there's a 3-story apartment complex that they built a few years ago that generates more traffic, and the parking is just crazy. Like they stated, they're saying that there's a lot of parking on Portland. Most of the parking issues is on Montford because they have those businesses already there and there's no place to park. So they generate a lot of debris, dirt, mud. Nobody, like I said, nobody cleans up under there anymore. We could never get SCDOT to come and do their job. I always have to reach out to Brian Shaheen or Dan Lucio or even the mayor himself to say, hey, we have an issue. What seems to be the problem? We can't seem to get in contact with SCDOT. So I am truly against this particular business, and I mean, I hate to say it, and it's only because you're what do I want to say? You're blocking us in. And you're blocking us in with a lot of unnecessary people that we don't need in our neighborhood. And I heard him say that that house on the corner of Portland and Rutledge, it's noisy, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing here, that nobody wants to live in the noisy neighborhood. Well, the current I-26 is in the entire neighborhood, and it runs all the way through, and lots of people of different ethnic backgrounds are moving into our neighborhood. So I find it very insulting for him to say that no one wants to live on the noisy street, because plenty of people live on the noisy street. As a matter of fact, he just said Mr. Ben is okay with the restaurant being there, and which Mr. Ben has been living there all my life as well. So, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Question from Ms. Quinn? Anyone else in opposition?
My name is Clarence Baxter, and I live on Montford Avenue. Okay, that corner is one of the worstest corners to live in instead of putting a business there. If you got 4 people in your family, you have to make another way in order to live there. The building is that small. And say a restaurant, come on. If you ever went on Rutledge Avenue and going to I-26, you better not step in the street because it's dangerous. The corner is real tight. And to put a restaurant there, I don't know if you all have been in that section or not. You go on Rutledge Avenue and going to I-26, that corner is real tight. And to put a restaurant there, no, I wouldn't even live there. If I lived there, I have to carry The house 2-story in order to be comfortable. That corner is real bad for a restaurant. We got restaurants all around there. Rutledge Avenue on Mount Pleasant Street. It was a full station there. They turned it into a restaurant. They had to make parking spaces. Now, the station was a little better because it was sitting back off the road. Down the street behind that building, there's 2 more restaurants. And the area is not good for any kind of other business other than the living. The house itself is really, I don't know if you all seen it. I can show you a picture, but you got to eyes see it, visible by seeing it yourself. The building is not fit for no restaurant. And just like I tell you, I wouldn't live on that corner. So why would I put a business there? No space. Now they're talking about the debris in the back. Who put it there? The city need to put some signs up there. And if anybody put it there, charge them for it. Really. Now, if a restaurant get there, where they gonna put their stuff, the trash and all that? They don't come through there but one time a week. And if it's a holiday, they miss that day. Now, if the holiday is on a Friday and they don't pick up the trash on a Friday, they gotta go to Monday. So it's really too bad in order for a person to develop a restaurant in that area. Thank you.
Good hands. Anybody else in opposition? Just to make sure we cover everyone. Okay. Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Dickerson, if y'all wish to rebut.
Yeah, I'll rebut. But I didn't mean to offend her. Wasn't calling the neighbor. I wasn't putting down the neighbors for being noisy. I think what I was trying to say is that corner is especially noisy, given the traffic from Rutledge, the people cutting over beyond Mass, beyond overpass right there. So it is more noisy, and as Mr. Baxter said, he wouldn't want to live there. I think we try to reach out. Unfortunately, there's no organized neighborhood association for this area, which we normally try to get to talk to get with the residents to tell them what we're trying. This is very small, yes. That's why it's not going to generate much traffic. There's more seats at the bar. At some of the places she's talking, twice as many seats in this entire place has. It's just really mean to be in like a neighborhood cafe, and that's it. So I think that's it.
Yeah, just a couple things. Just to reiterate, it was heavy drinking that I don't expect. I mean, obviously it is a cafe, right? And we do want to sell alcohol, so there will be drinking. But we're not going to be open late. We're talking late. So big difference between that and heavy drinking that would occur on the street, right? The second thing is, it was general business way before I bought it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, I was saying it was general, it was actually light industrial, they ain't got non-general business. I was just telling you the history of it.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I would throw out there, I'm not sure if it will have any effect whatsoever, but we'll personally clean up. And I'll make sure we clean up, and you can hold us accountable for it, you can hold us accountable for it, not just ours, but the entire section of it. Right? We'll add gravel or whatever's needed to be done there. And in terms of trash pickup daily, it's dumpsters, and they come every day to take it. We would have those blocked in and fenced in. Same thing with the rubbish truck. We would have a fence there, so that there's not people just walking into rubbish. There wouldn't be an entryway on rubbish. So I'm not sure if it'll make a difference, but those are things that I would like to do just in general of being there. Not just to make our cafe look good, but to make your community look good too.
You just have one more thing. So I know you can do it for a use variance. I don't know if it's a parking variance. If you could stipulate like hours, like no use after 8 or something like that. I'm not sure if that's allowable for parking, something like that to ensure that this is not going to be a drunken night.
Thank you all. Any questions?
I just want to add something. How y'all doing? My name is John Bellamy. I've been here about since 2016, North Carolina. And just to add to that, I know everybody had something to say about it. They're riding the town. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of people moving. They ride bikes. And there's a big bad to have an accident happen. They want to decide. They ride bikes up and down that street. The back's rolling down.
Mr. Gentleman, I'm sorry, I apologize. Just for the record, are you in opposition or are you rebutting the opposition of the application?
I'm just adding to the opposition.
Okay.
Just adding to the opposition. A lot of kids are riding up and down that road. So it'll be problematic. Yeah.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, we're going to close the public portion of this application for board discussion. Motion.
Appears that, with 44 people being able to be in the establishment, it's a lot for a small location like that. Huge concerns about the traffic patterns in that area. And this approval would go along with the land and not the owner. I know the owner has great intentions, but when it goes along with the land, it's hard to control. I would be in support of it.
Thoughts, especially in regards to Mr. Batchelder's point, and C and D. Variance may or may not be.
I agree with what you just said. That was my concern too about these conveying with the next property and what that might look like. With the next property owner, what that might look like in the future. And I agree with Mr. Batchelder's assessment that it doesn't meet the third part of the variance test, that it doesn't necessarily restrict the use of the property.
No motion. Further discussion.
Motion to deny.
Everyone moves to deny the application. Is there a second?
One second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? None. The application is unanimously denied, 5-0. Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item B1, 23 Reed Street, East Side. TMS number 459090430. Request the second one-year extension of a vested right that expires on February 18th, 2023. Pursuant to section 54-962, vested right pertains to variance granted with condition to allow a single-family residence and HVAC platform. Zone VR2F. Owner is Don Lindbergh, applicant Clay Shackelford, architect. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a request to extend by 1 year the approval for this property that was granted back in, it was granted in 2000. So they're entitled to extensions as long as they come through the process and make the application prior to the expiration of the approval. And in this case, we feel that they meet all the requirements for the extension, and we recommend.
There have been no changes since the initial application.
And
it's approval. And the city's recommendation is for approval. Is there anyone in opposition to item B1, 23 Reed Street? Close the public portion. Discussion board.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, move to approval. Second by Ms. Richards.
Chair, this is a name correction. The original approval is actually February 18th of 2020.
I believe he said 20.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record.
All those in favor of approval? Aye. Opposed? None. The motion is unanimously approved. Item D2, 116 East Bay Street, TMS number 45809040022. Request an appeal of the zoning administrator's decision to prohibit a retail use from having tables and chairs for patrons, preempt South Carolina state law by controlling how alcohol is sold and served, revoke a sidewalk cafe permit, and prohibit issuance of a new sidewalk cafe permit. Zoned LB. Owner is Bernie Maybank, applicant Aaron Sandy, second Beer and Wine at Rainbow LLC. Mr. Batchelder.
So this property is located on East Bay Street, just south of Broad. It's actually unusual in that it fronts on 3 streets. Exchange Street on the north, East Bay, and then East Elliott Street. And the space we're talking about tonight is the 116 East Bay Street space. And you can see, well, it's hard to see on this map, but that space is roughly in the middle of this building. And here's a view looking from East Bay Street. So this is a liquor store, which is on the north end of the building, north end of the property. And then you have this space right here, which is the space we're talking about tonight on 16 East Bay Street. And then there's a vacant retail space right here on the south end of the building. So the applicant and I have, I guess, reached a point where we're just in disagreement over some things on this property. And so they've appealed my decisions to you. And so let me just back up and give you a little bit of background. We started talking, the owner of the business, Aaron Sandy, and myself, about this business, I think back in 2019, I think it was before the pandemic. And it was a retail use, it was going to be a retail use wine theater being sold. And then the opportunity to have people sample something before they buy it. Okay? So it's really a retail use, very limited drinking on site. And that was the idea, and Mr. Sandy proceeded through the approval process. So this is an application that was filed with the city back in, well, I can't see the date, I think it was 2020, sometime in 2020.
October 6th, 2020.
Yeah. So this is an application to do the construction on the interior to convert it into the space that he wants for his retail business. And you can see the current use of the building was retail at the time, was jewelry store, proposed use retail. The plans that were submitted for the permit, this is the first sheet, this is a blow up, and you see the retail space and the references to all the retail spaces in here. And then you see over on the right side of this slide, a blow up of the building code information that is placed on the plan. In the use group, IBC section 309 refers to the International Building Code, and group M is a mercantile use. That's the building code term for retail use. And this is that section from the International Building Code where it speaks to retail uses, as opposed to bars or restaurants, which are assembly uses in the building code. So, second page of the plans that were submitted for the building permit, and the third page. And then, after doing the construction and completing that the applicant applies for a business license and certificate of occupancy. This is the certificate of occupancy that was issued. Actually, it was issued on December 10th of 2021. It's for an occupancy classification, mercantile, M for mercantile. And these are my conditions that I placed on the issuance of this CO that would specifically limit this use to a retail use. And then I mentioned in the end, tables and chairs for patrons shall not be permitted. Again, not trying to move in the direction of this being more of a bar or restaurant. It's really not permitted to be that kind of use. It's supposed to be a retail use. And then that was, so that's late 2021, late 2021 when this is issued. And eventually the business opens up. And then in the summer, last summer, an application comes through our office for a sidewalk cafe permit. I was not aware of this application being filed, and the person on my staff that would use these is supposed to do a better job of reviewing things and make sure that they don't issue a permit when that use is not allowed by the business license and the CO. So had they checked, they would have seen that tables and chairs for patrons shall not be permitted. That was part of the CO that was issued, that was in effect at the time, and therefore the application never should have been issued, or the permit never should have been issued. But moving beyond that, this is what was applied for, and of course you have your application form, you submit information about the tables and the chairs that you're going to be using, the specs on those, and you submit your site plan showing the tables and chairs. Well, he's got 11 tables and 22 chairs in front of the 116 East Bay Street location. So that to me is not a retail use. I mean, you're promoting the on-site consumption of beer and wine and food, and something that doesn't, is far beyond what a retail use would have. So I sent a letter after this, and after I became aware of this, revoking the issuance of that sidewalk cafe permit for those reasons. And we had some discussion since then about that, and we apparently didn't come to an agreement because he's appealing my decision over these matters. But again, going back to what I thought I understood in the beginning was going to operate a retail use where you could go in there and buy a bottle of wine, some beer, that you would take home and consume, and then have the opportunity for people to sample those things on site if they wanted to before they purchased. And so, but each time I think I hear different ideas about how this could be something else that to me is not a retail use. So I guess we just have a difference of opinion over what a retail use is. And it's own limited business. So a restaurant is perfectly allowed within that zoning district, which I'll go back to. You can see the pink area, which runs along Broad Street, covers the east side of East Bay Street, starting at Boyce's Wharf and moving north. It's all limited business. Now we have many residential uses in that area, but limited business does allow for that kind of use, but that's a different application process and one that would require your approval because there isn't sufficient parking on site to accommodate all the parking for that type of use versus a retail use. So anyway, that's why I've made the decisions I've made, and I guess we're at this point. So I would hope that it would still continue to be retail use, no sidewalk cafe permit. And so on and so forth, so.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Okay. So the city's recommendation is for denial of the appeal. We will, is there anyone here in opposition to this? Good, okay, we'll get to you all in a moment. Let's hear from the applicant first.
Thank you. Bernie Maybank. I'm actually here in two capacities. One, the owner of the building, and second of all, as the attorney for Theron. All the other applications you'll have before you today is where the property owner is seeking a variance or a special exception. Ours is the only one where the city is seeking a variance. Lee is seeking a variance and a special exception that he has placed into our CO. The burden of proof is on him to prove why he's putting special conditions into our permit. We're not found in any permit of any of these businesses around us. My family's owned the building for over 100 years. Keith Lloyd used to ask how long has your family owned the building, and I can randomly say 75 years. Well, now that I'm 65, I can tell you it's a lot longer than, it's well over 100 years. That building has always been commercial. In my lifetime, let's say I'm 65, it was a barber shop for decades, and then it was Dice Jewelers for decades. And then there was a clothing store briefly in there at some point. So for 100 years, this building has been commercial and purely commercial with no residential on the first floor. What it is, and the barber shop and Dice Jewelers were full of tables and chairs, and I'll get to that in a minute. The applicant's a very small, high-end wine store. It's only about 700 square feet. It's tiny. It's very high-end. They sell a $10,000 bottle of champagne if y'all want to celebrate Valentine's Day next year for $10,000 bottle of champagne. And the wine starts at about $40 a bottle. It's not a college place. Nobody, when they sold it by the glass, it's typically wine's about $12. College kids aren't going to go in there and spend $12 on a glass of wine. And when we do sell beer and wine by the glass, over 90% of our gross receipts from the sale of wine bottles. We have a huge collection of wine for sale in there. He spent well over $100,000 renovating my building. I was thrilled with that, needless to say. And it took him almost 2 years to renovate it and get city approval. It took so long, primarily because of the pandemic. It was very hard to get contractors, and then because of COVID, it took the city a long time to issue the CO. He didn't start the renovations until he received an email, which y'all have in your package, basically blessing his business plan, selling beer and wine by the glass and by the bottle. And so he spent $100,000 after he gets an email from Lee saying he can do it, that it'll be permitted, and we have a late file handout for you there. So we are appealing the special conditions contained in the CO. So he's seeking the variance, not us. He put special conditions into the CO that are not found in anybody else's, so that the burden of proof is on him to prove the special conditions. It's not on us to review them, it's on him to put them in. So the special conditions prohibit 1, inside tables and chairs, 2, outside tables and chairs, and 3, sale of beer and wine by the glass. That also allows the free samples of beer and wine, but that violates the state Hastings law, and we never asked for that to be put into the CO. Now, we are literally directly across the street from a very fine restaurant. I've eaten there a number of times, number 1 Broad Street. And number 1 Broad Street has a bar underneath it. They have the exact same beer and wine permit that we have, and they sell beer and wine by the glass, and they have numerous 25 to 30 tables and chairs in their establishment. We are literally across the street on Exchange Street from a cigar store. The cigar store sells beer and wine, and I go in there from time to time. The cigar store sells beer and wine by the glass, and they have numerous 4, 5, 6, it's a small establishment, numerous tables and chairs in there as well. We are 2 buildings down from Oak Restaurant. They have the exact same beer and wine permit we have. They sell beer and wine by the glass, and they have 25 to 30 tables and chairs. Vastly bigger. All those places are a lot bigger than our establishment. We're 4 blocks from the Carolina Yacht Club. Carolina Yacht Club has the exact same beer and wine permit we have, and they sell beer and wine by the glass, and they have countless, too many to count, tables and chairs in 3 separate buildings. Those 3 establishments sell liquor. We do not sell liquor. We sell purely beer and wine. Regarding the outside tables, we applied for and received a permit, and we put 4 outside tables of 8 chairs there. The permit allows us more, but that's all we desired. So after we got the permit, we spent about $4,000 just on insurance. The city requires insurance. The insurance policy cost us $4,000. We spent several $1,000s on architectural rendering. Who'd have thought that in an outside table, you need to have the architectural rendering, which you do, and then you have the 4 tables and chairs. So we spent roughly $8,000 on outside tables and chairs after we got the permit. The city then revoked the permit, as Lee indicated, revoked the permit because the special conditions, the variance and special exceptions he put into the CO. Those are his special conditions he put into the CO. Now, I'm sure we're going to hear some people who don't like outside seating. That's a matter for them to take up with city council. We met, city council has an ordinance that allows outside seating. We met the conditions of that outside seating ordinance. We actually got a permit for it. So their gripe is with the city of Charleston on the outside table seating ordinance, not with us. We met the conditions and actually got the permit for the outside seating. They then told us we had to stop selling beer and wine by the glass or they would revoke our permit. So obviously we stopped it. That's wrong on several fronts. So they don't obviously don't have a problem with us selling beer and wine by the bottle. There's a problem. He put a special condition in of variance saying we could not sell beer and wine by the glass. Now that's wrong on several fronts. One, state law preempts the sale of alcohol. The city of Charleston has no authority to say you can't sell beer and wine by the glass if you have a ABL permit from the Department of Revenue. Now the city has lots of authority for restaurants. They can restrict hours. They can restrict lighting. They have a lot of control over restaurants. The only thing they don't have control over is the sale of alcohol. But that is surely within the province of the Department of Revenue under state law. There's no city ordinance that allows me to restrict us to not selling it by the glass. There's none. You cannot point to any ordinance that restricts the sale of wine by the glass if you have the Department of Revenue beer and wine permit. So it violates state law. State law preempts the sale of alcohol, preempts municipalities from controlling the sale of alcohol. That's state law. And second of all, there's no city ordinance that authorizes it. And third of all, there's 3 restaurants with literally a stone's throw. I'm not exaggerating. They're directly across the street that sell beer and wine by the glass. Vastly larger than ours. To the extent that people have a problem with outside tables and chairs, they need to take that up with Charleston City Council. The City Council has an ordinance that allows it. We met the ordinance's requirements. We actually got the permit. But to the extent they have a problem with it, that's something they need to take up with City Council. Incredibly, Lee has inserted a variance, a special exception in our CO that says we can't have tables and chairs. We had 2 very nice leather tables and chairs we wanted to put in, and he said we can't have tables and chairs. Now, the restaurant directly across the street probably has 40 or 50. Even the little tiny little tobacco store has 8 or 10. Oak Restaurant probably has 40 or 50. And he said his variance says no tables or chairs in the retail store. Now, the reason you want tables, you can go in there as a couple. You've got a huge collection of wine. One of the people in the couple takes their time looking at all of the wines. There's a bewildering assortment. The other wants to sit down. I'm 65, I need to sit down. I don't particularly enjoy standing while the people I'm with are shopping. So it's much more onerous than it sounds at first glance. If you go in there and you're standing up the whole time, it's very onerous. So in summary, we have a tiny, high-end retail pure wine store. The wine starts at about 40 bucks. We have seven, we heard a lot about parking, which is irrelevant to us. We have 7 parking spaces for our tiny little joint. We met with the Charleston Neighborhood Association, and they were very supportive. We have a petition, and we handed out a petition signed by over 100 neighbors supporting it, and some another of them are here today. Our parade of horrors started when one person, Manny Unger, filed a protest, and he met with me several times. He purchased his house after we had already started our renovation, and he sold his house before we completed our renovation. He wasn't even there a year, but he set off a chain of parade of horrors, which plagues us to right now. Our neighbors have been incredibly supportive. We brought some of them here today, and we have petitions signed by 100 neighbors, and so that's my talk, and Darren would like to talk to you for a minute or two about the emails that you received.
Thank you, Mr. Maybank. So my name is Darren Sandy. I'm the business owner. I just would like to reiterate what Bernie said. We are a retail store. I've had several conversations with Lee about how we should be classified. There's no guidance out there. There's nothing that says if you do this in your retail, if you do this, your restaurant. So what I said was, well, the state of South Carolina says, with bars that have liquor, we don't have liquor, we have beer and wine only. But with bars that have liquor, you have to have 51% of your sales be food, or you can't have a liquor license, basically, right? So more than 90% of our sales are retail sales, meaning that they are taken off premise and they're consumed at home. Now, we do expect that to come down some, but it's a very high percentage. And I'll correct him on one thing, the bottle of champagne is actually 12,000. We have some real nice stuff. And that's just who we cater to. It's a luxury store.
And it's still on the shelf for sale, by the way.
We did that because we respect the neighborhood. I've been a business owner on that corner. I'm an attorney. I've been a business owner on that corner for 15 years. I've represented tons of people in that area. I know the area very well. My wife, who was here, she worked at Paul Beth Jewelers. We knew all the business owners. We've been out there forever. And so we did little things when we opened this store. We have one of the walls in the store, we used wood from a hole in the battery, and it wasn't cheap. We had to buy that wood, and we did that to show our respect for the neighborhood. We spent money on landscaping. The city of Charleston has neglected that block for, 20 years, and it looked awful, and it's a very important part of our city. And we landscaped it. We're not finished yet. We started landscaping it, and it already looks 100 times better. We really have been over backwards with that, but I'll say, my conversations with Leah, it goes back a while, I understand that, but I never said anything about samples. And there's an email, if you look at the 3rd page on there, that was the first email I got back to me that said, as long as you're serving food with your beer and wine by the glass, you're good to go. It's something we can approve. And that's what I relied upon when I spent money buying alcohol and Beth, number one, and then bringing in antiques and things like that. Something else I'll say, when you walk in our store, you don't walk in our store and say, oh my God, this is a bar. We have no bar. We have a retail counter. You walk in, there's a retail counter to the right. It's actually a French carpenter's workbench from 1888. We had retail shelving. You can see the plan. We designed the store exactly to the plan. When you walk in, you think retail store. We had 2 leather chairs in there initially that people could sit at, like Bernie was saying, and relax. It's not a bar. I will tell you, I'm a business owner. I want to make the most money I can. I'm not going to make money there as a bar. When we talk about parking, our capacity is 12. We have 7 parking spaces. So we have more than enough. I actually had those parking spaces, if you're wondering, I had those parking spaces in my law practice, which was at 3 Broad, and I still have them. And so I use them for this new business. So we have, that's not an issue. I think, as far as what Bernie was saying, we do believe that the free sampling of beer and wine language that's in the CO is illegal. Therefore, it would be unenforceable, and it should be void. It should be removed. Because state law doesn't allow free sampling when you have an on-premise license. That's what we have. It doesn't allow us to do that. So for the city to say we can do it is saying we can do something illegal. And then as far as the stools or the tables and chairs for patrons, Paul and Beth were in there for 100 years, and they had a ton of tables and chairs. It's impossible, if you really think about that, it's impossible to operate a retail business without tables and chairs. I mean, in my opinion, that's just an abuse of discretion. It goes too far. And, you know, I can understand the concern with us wanting to be a bar. I get that. But when you come in our business, it's just not like that. Our employees are trained to know that we are not a bar, don't act like a bar, we don't let people get drunk there. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I've got bottles of beer, 12-ounce bottles of beer that are $40. Like, that's just not our clientele. So, you know, and again, I'll tell you, you know, as far as the square footage is concerned, you know, the previous people that were up here, you know, they had 44 capacity, they were only required to have 5 parking spaces. We have 12, and we have 7 parking spaces. It's a tiny spot, and we take care of our own trash. We're good neighbors, and so we've tried our best to work out everything with all the neighbors. We've reached out on several occasions. And of course, there are always going to be people out there that don't want us there. The commercial can never change. It's been commercial, like Bernie said, for over 100 years. And it's never going to encroach on anything else. It's there. It can't expand. It is what it is. So we would really sincerely appreciate you guys seeing our point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Anyone else in favor of the appeal? Doesn't wish to speak? Okay. We'll now hear from those in opposition to. There's a handful of y'all. Maybe you will line up.
We actually have a couple people. I'm not sure they heard you talk so softly.
Yeah, so typically we would have a 10-minute time limit for both the application and for the opposition. Because there are a large number of people here,
Right.
We'll extend that briefly. So
Can we at least acknowledge the people that are here for us? Just, can we have one hand?
yeah, if we've got people who are here who wish to speak or not speak.
That are here supporting our business, just raise your hand if you will.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. We'll, for the opposition opportunity now to speak.
You, John?
I'm John. And Mr. Wilson, there were 15 minutes for the initial presentation, so I'll do the same, and any others in opposition, the same amount of time.
I'll do as quickly as I can. We're James Wilson with Longwood Bond Tickets, and here on behalf of John Hayes, was it 97 State across the street from the premises. There are a whole lot of things to address here. I'll tell you procedurally, as this board knows, this is a question for you. This is an appeal of the administrator's decision. It's a question for you to decide, did Mr. Batchelder err? Did he misunderstand or misconstrue the facts for the ordinance and the decision? So this is not the board evaluating variance and undue hardship as for conditions for special exception. It's not sort of a balancing and counting noses of supporters or opposition. This is a question of, did you, through your authority, Mr. Batchelder, err in his interpretation, his understanding of the zoning ordinance? So the specific issue was a sidewalk cafe permit issued in error, wasn't properly but the simple answer to that is that sidewalk cafes serve to mean that. That's what they do. You have to be properly licensed under ordinance. You have to be properly licensed to serve food and beverage. The applicant business in this case, while we recognize they have an alcohol license from the state, they're not licensed in an eating and drinking place in Charleston. That's how the Charleston zoning ordinance describes the use of an eating and drinking place, to do with the table of uses. There are very specific requirements, as Mr. Batchelder described, for eating and drinking places. The applicant did not apply for those, hasn't satisfied those. They are in a limited business zoning district. They could pursue that process. That's not what they have done. They very specifically applied for a retail store approval, and that's not the same thing as eating and drinking place, so that's fine. The CO, the conditions in the CO, I believe, were really just there to clarify the limits of what was being included with that license. The CO is not putting in there, that doesn't change the zoning ordinance. What that does is make clear to the applicant, put them on clear notice that you are retail, you're not in the business of selling drinks for on-premises consumption, that could be drinking. You're in the retail business, but we recognize, but that's fine, you know, let you do samples, you're not selling them. And it was extremely clear in that CA. So the applicant, I think, is making an argument that since somebody did in error approve the sidewalk cafe, that has to stand, that can't be revoked. That is not the case under South Carolina law. We have clear case law from the Supreme Court of South Carolina that if an officer of the city makes an error, even issuing a permit, if that's an error, that can be revoked. There is no estoppel for that. The applicant, of course, knew that must be an error based on the emails they got from Mr. Batchelder and what the CEO itself said. So, moreover, you can't ask for estoppel if you actually knew that is not permitted. The applicant also argues that our state law regulating alcohol sales preempts the city's zoning authority. So that is not correct under South Carolina law. We, like most states, have a statute passed by our legislature. There's our zoning enabling statute. And it very specifically said, you cities, municipalities, and counties, you can regulate the location of uses, whether it's alcohol uses or other uses, within your city. The city absolutely has that authority. This has been taken to the U.S. Supreme Court about whether zoning authority is legitimate. The state also, of course, regulates lots of things. States regulate and license doctors and realtors and hospitals, motor vehicles, all sorts of things. That principle of preemption would be kind of crazy, right? That, oh, well, if there's a license from the state, then zoning authority goes out the window. You can't have any say over where hospitals or schools or anything go. A number of things I just want to quickly hit on. It doesn't matter that when you go in the business that it doesn't look like a bar. Zoning is about views. It's not about what the appearance is. We leave that to the VA office. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the property's been commercial for 100 years. That's great. It can continue to be commercial for another 100 years. But that's just because it's commercial for certain uses, that doesn't mean it's commercial for any use, right? It doesn't matter that college kids aren't going to come there. It doesn't matter that other businesses nearby can sell alcohol because they're properly licensed. They went through the right process and are properly licensed. So the fact that there are other businesses serving alcohol around them, that doesn't change what's the case for this particular business. In short, they did not meet the conditions for selling beer and wine by the glass under our city ordinance. So I just want to come back to the question is, did Mr. Batchelder err, did the zoning administrator err in this decision to revoke and erroneously issue sidewalk cafe permit? We think it's clear under the ordinance, and the applicant clearly had knowledge from the email from the CO that was an error. It doesn't even matter necessarily, as long as it's clear, and it is under our ordinance. The applicant says the people who are objecting should go to city council. That's not the right forum for this. This is a question of interpreting our zoning ordinance as it stands. If the applicant doesn't like the interpretation of the ordinance by the city, what they do, they come to you, they ask you, did Mr. Batchelder, did the zoning administrator err? If you don't think he erred, then if they want to appeal it, they go to a court. This doesn't go to city council. This goes to a court if they think this is incorrect. We believe it's perfectly correct. If you think you can retail and eating and drinking places, restaurants, is perfectly clear. We would respectfully urge the board to affirm the zoning administrator's decision. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Please.
Good evening, board. My name is John Hayes. I live over at 97 East Bay Street. I believe Mr. Wilson did a very good job of outlining the reason why Mr. Batchelder didn't err. I do want to clarify a bunch of the things brought up to you For the applicants, number one, Mr. Baymack said that he met with the Charleston Neighborhood Association and everything fine. So I can't remember his exact words, but I've been asked to interview today on behalf of the Charleston Neighborhood Association to say that they object to this applicant's appeal. Lee Higdon is actually the president of the Charleston Neighborhood Association, and for reasons is unable to be here tonight, has asked me to convey that. A couple other things. As far as what is on the CO, to give a little bit of context to that. The reason that's on the CO, and one reason on the CO, is because that was what was promised to the neighborhood. And that was told to me by Mr. Sandy that it would just be a nice place that we may be able to give out little samples, see if somebody wanted it, and then they could buy it and sample it if they liked it, they could buy it and take it home to the family, whatever to have it. That was not only told to me, but it was told to Mr. Dan Miller, who was sitting right there, the exact same thing. I didn't know Mr. Miller until, I think the first time we met was 3 days ago. Had the same thing, was told the same thing. And for your understanding, Mr. Miller is the president of the HOA at Printers Road, which is 18 homes across the street from the tavern. And they object to it as well. At this time, I'm sure he'll want to speak. I've got Escania Zoretta back there. He lives next door to me with his 2 young children. He objects to it. There's Mr. Ross, Jimmy Ross over there. He lives on 95 East Bay. He objects to it. And I think the most important part, and this we have to think about, is again, it doesn't matter whether one bottle of vodka, as it's now called, is able to serve wine food, because they're permitted to under the city. If anybody said, if I get a permit from the state, and I can do whatever I want to with it in the city, because that law preempts city ordinances, we're gonna have a major problem, not only in Charleston, but all around the state, number one. Also, as far as these businesses being with its own growth, that is true. LeBlanc is somewhat catty corner across the street. I can't throw a rock to Oak. Oak might be one building, but it's a heck of a long building all the way down the road. Other thing, as far as it being high-end or not high-end, that doesn't matter. The permit and the zoning in the city doesn't say, hey, this is going to be high-end for these people with money, so you can do the zoning one way versus a shop that's not high-end and you can treat it a different way. The zoning laws will speak to that. The zoning laws are what the zoning laws are. We believe Mr. Batchelor was correct. We were told it was going to be a retail shop. It is a retail shop. It's CO'd as a retail shop. We would like to continue it there. We have tried to be reasonable as far as it goes. The reason that nobody opposed it the first time it ever opened was because we were told it was going to be exactly what was in the CO. So nobody opposed it. If we had known that this was going to, go from what they said it was going to be and what it was permitted in the CO, we would have been objecting to it and we would have called it back in. We took them on their word. We took what was done by the city. That's what it's going to be. And I'm sorry that they don't like what it's classified as in the CO. This isn't the place to do it. When it was CO, they could have at that time stood up and said, no, I don't agree with this. This is wrong. You don't have the right to do this, and I'm not going to do it. And we're not going to do that. So we're going to fight you and go through the proper channels. But what they did do instead is say, okay, I'm going to take that CO, as Lee Batchelor, with the conditions Lee Batchelor said, and we're going to do that. And then when we get an opportunity, we're going to try to push it through in another way. And we're going to put tables out there. And we're going to serve beer and wine. They've never been permitted to serve beer and wine, yet they have. And that is indisputable that they did it without asking permission, without fighting their classification. I'm sure there might be others that do want to speak to this, so I want to yield my time. But thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, John. Mr. Chairman, Board, my name is Carol Hayward. I live at 109 East Bay, directly across the street from the enterprise we're talking about. Before I got up here today, I did a little research and looked for beer and wine or wine bars in the city of Charleston. I Googled the top 4, all of them south of Broad. And out of the 4, only one has 2 tables out front. That's Ben 152 King Street. Commercial area.
North of Broad.
North Broad, I'm sorry, North Broad. 152, commercial area, King Street, 2 tables out front, almost at the corner of Queen and King. Wine Company, a live work development at 55 Wentworth. By Eland Development. Grand Bohemian, 55 Wentworth. And a hotel, the Hotel Charleston renovation, Bistro Avon, 40 Arundel, can't read my own writing. But I'm a homeowner, and I understand Mr. Sandy's investment's $100,000. I have a good bit more invested in my house across the street with a lifetime investment. The bar was not there when we bought it some 13, 14 years ago, and I'm afraid it will affect the value of my house. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Do we have more
I
time?
believe we have time for one more. There.
I would like to speak on behalf of the applicant.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of us who like a chance to say yes and,
Great.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
I think Bob's going.
We'll have, sorry, give
I'll be
me
quick.
just a second.
My name's Rob.
Sorry, we'll provide 5 additional minutes for opposition, and then we will extend the rebuttal period as well to allow the applicant to have their.
Perfect. So my name's Robert Bowen. I live at 102 East Bay. I'm currently the president of what's known as the East Bay and Elliott regime, which abuts the property in question with 3 units on East Elliott, 3 on East Bay, right across from Mango Row, and 3 on Voices Wharf. The members of our units are all opposed, allowing the serving of certainly alcohol, even food, or the placement of tables and chairs outside on the sidewalk. This is a very highly congested area. This is just going to make it more congested. The serving of alcohol is obviously a concern, and obviously it's going to lead to additional litter. I go around pretty much every week, and I pick up the things that are missed or dropped by people around our building, and I think this is going to simply add to the amount of trash on the street. But more importantly, this is largely a residential neighborhood. It can be busy during the day, but after sundown, it is very, very quiet. And it is the south of Broad area, which is a historic area. There are not restaurants with tables and chairs outside, other than the yacht club, which is very, very different from this proposition. So I just want to emphasize that the members of the regime that I represent are all very much opposed to granting this waiver. Thank you.
My name is Dan Miller. I live at 109 East Bay, Unit 1H. As referenced, I'm the HOA president. We have 18 units. My unit is directly across the street on the first floor from the beer and wine store, so I have a very clear view of what it has been, what it was with tables and chairs, and what it is again today. I want to clarify a couple of things. One, I think Bernie Maybach brought up the main hunger. When the beer and wine store had applied for, I guess, a beer and wine license from the state, they put up the little placard in their window, it was a common period, and Manning, Hunger, and myself met with Darren Sandy. Darren Sandy told us, promised us, that they would only do tasting and not expand, have the doors closed, and that has not been the case. So he was, kind of moved the bar to the right. And if he has the certificate of occupancy from you that stated no tables and chairs, why did he ever apply for a table and chair patio? I don't know. He's trying to skirt the system. And it is a residential neighborhood. We don't need a commercial creep after hours continue to come into our neighborhood. As been mentioned many times, we already live in Tourist Central down there. The tables and chairs are blocking sidewalks, tour groups going back and forth, normal residents going back and forth. I strongly oppose tables and chairs. I do support his business. He's done a nice job of fixing it up. You've heard how much money he's put into it. Done a nice job. His employees are great. A bunch of them are here. I want to get along. They've manicured the neighborhood, something that Bernie Maybank should have done. But the owner of the business did it himself. I know a lot of people in our neighborhood go there to buy wine and beer, probably majority to take out. But if you heard tonight, 90% is their takeout of their sales, but that's going to decrease with the tables and chairs. That means more people sitting on the street, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. possibly.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We'll go another 2 minutes.
I'll be as quick as I can. I'm Susie Hayward. I'm at 109 East Bay, 2A. I have most windows facing him. I think this is incorrect, but we have the most windows. I'm a former planner from the city of Columbia. We live near 5 Points up there, and we have fought this all over. Now, none of these other bars they're talking about. One Broad faces Broad Street. The cigar thing on Exchange Street faces Exchange Street. We're talking about quality of life issue and where you draw the line. And exactly as Mr. Goodwin said, the zoning goes with the building. If he leaves and he's got the zoning to have that sidewalk cafe, God only knows what it'll be. You know, I mean, I don't oppose what he's doing now inside. I don't oppose that people sit down inside. I oppose having sidewalk seating because, and I think he's got plans to greatly increase the size of this. So it really could be a detriment. I'm going to lose probably on at least half, if not 2/3 of what I got in my place if this becomes a sidewalk cafe. I certainly wouldn't have them all. Let me see if anybody else can help. Thank you so much.
We've heard from a handful of, this is one other, we've heard from a handful of folks in opposition. Are there any others?
I am in opposition.
Others who wish to speak in opposition, including yourself? Yeah, okay. The board will permit a brief extension of time limits. Have I exceeded my purview to allow additional time? You guys are on these proceedings.
I don't think so.
I just want to make sure we're understanding.
What have we decided?
Sorry?
What have we decided?
Only asking if we're within our rights to extend time limits for speaking on either in favor of and opposed to the application. So you have been offered some additional time to speak as well.
My name is Nelson Hicks. I live at 109 East Bay, directly across the street. And I am a member of the Charleston Neighborhood Association. I am very much in favor of what Mr. Bachelor has done with regards to this property. I agree with no tables and chairs. Primarily, this is retail. And if it's retail and you're taking it home, I see no reason for the tables and chairs. The area is in fact congested. It's full of tours. It will tie up that area even more than it is normally. So I very much am opposed to the proposition that's in front of us. I'm in favor of what the zoning director has done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. Do you wish to speak in opposition?
Yes, for 1 minute. I will be very quick.
It is important for this board to be able to hear from all members of the public who speak, and so on that basis, I'll allow you to speak as well. In opposition, we will allow the applicant ample time.
Thank you very much. Sam Bowen, 102 East Bay Street. I want to give you a little bit of a different perspective. So our townhouse is on the corner of East Bay, Orange Ward. We are inundated with tourists, tour groups every day,
bridal groups, you name it. Many of them will stand right to the tour guides, right in front of my garden, or in front of my stoop. I have Charleston livability on my speed dial. Alcohol beverages and non-alcohol beverages are left on the ledges of the building, as is food and food wrappers. We have people sit on our front stoop. I really don't mind if it's pouring rain, if it's too hot, that's okay. But it happens very frequently. We even have articles of clothing left on our front stoop. So by the time 6 o'clock rolls around and the mayhem has dissipated, you know, it's wonderful because it's quiet and it's a neighborhood. I know my neighbors on this day. I know them on East Elliott, what happened. So I am in opposition. But I just wanted to give you a different perspective in terms of what we deal with during the day and what we don't want in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now allow Mr. Maybank and Mr. Sandy and all those who are in favor of the appeal to speak, and you'll have ample time and opportunity to present your rebuttal.
Is this rebuttal or the witnesses speaking in favor of it?
Sorry, you're in favor of the appeal, so
Right.
this would be in rebuttal to the opposition to the appeal.
Right.
And I believe it is limited to only the applicant and the,
Right, the applicant.
So we didn't get a chance for anyone to speak on our behalf, and several people came. Is that possible? We have so many people here that are
As I
supporting.
understand, were they prevented from speaking in favor of the first round?
I think so. I mean, you guys kind of moved on. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
On that basis, if they wish to provide a new dimension to the argument, then I think they should be heard.
Do you want to before us or?
Kind of out of order, isn't it?
Yeah. So we didn't get a chance. No one got a chance to speak.
No one stood up.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
They all raised their hands.
We all raised our
They
hands.
wanted to move on.
We moved on.
Did you go?
We all raised our hands.
They raised their hands. Yeah. Okay. I think we would like to hear from all the public members. It's important.
Anybody would care to speak in favor of the application?
If you have, yeah. Thank you.
I'll make sure we didn't pass notes for the record. I'll make it quick. I'm actually an employee with Theron. I've worked with them for over 10 years. And, you know, there were some things that were brought up about hours of operation. We're actually only open until about 8 p.m. We close at 9 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. And I've witnessed people coming from Oak, One Umbrella, the Bonk, even the beer and wine cigar shop wander down these specs. So the fact that, you know, our store is being trashed when I come in the morning and I open up the entire thing, I see trash from other businesses. I've never seen somebody actually take a can out and leave it on the street. So I just want to kind of clarify that as well. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Hi, folks. I'm actually, I'm Cordero. I'm actually one of the neighbors. I live on 40 State Street, and I'm in support of Mr. Sandy and what he's doing. We actually enjoy walking up from State Street to have a drink, sit down. So we'd like that to actually continue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
40 State Street. No.
I'm still a neighbor. We're still a neighbor.
We'll walk away.
Yeah, it's what we're like. Why are we
Mr. Maybank, is there anyone else who wishes to
Anyone else care to speak on behalf of the applicant? We got a bunch of them in here, but they're camera shy, you know.
understand?
Can we raise our hand?
I believe you all had an opportunity to raise your hands in the first call. If you wish to raise your hands in favor, please do so. Those who are opposed, also please raise your hand.
There's a few outside in favor.
Those who are opposed, please raise your hand as well. Thank you. Appreciate it. There are a number of people on both sides of this issue, so I hope you can appreciate the challenge before this board. At this time, Mr. Maybank and Mr. Sandy, please present your rebuttal.
We heard lots of talk about zoning. That's about all we heard. We are properly zoned. We meet all the zoning requirements. The Whether people don't like alcohol is one thing, but we meet all the zoning requirements. That's the whole reason we put the special conditions into the CO, is because we met all the zoning requirements. Most of the discussion we've heard about zoning is completely irrelevant to us. We met all of the zoning requirements. Regarding the preemption of local law, of local ADL, I agree with the attorney's analysis. But the city can zone restaurants all they want. They can put all kinds of special conditions on restaurants. The only one they can't put on relates to the sale of alcohol. That's exclusively under the jurisdiction of the Department of Revenue, and the city of Charleston has no jurisdiction to say whether or not we can sell two glasses, whether or not we can sell wine by the glass. We have the exact same permit, let me repeat, as Oak, Lodge, the bank, the French restaurant. We have all the exact same permits. It sells beer and wine by the glass all night long. They have multiple tables and chairs. We're the only ones that don't have the tables and chairs. The one thing we have not heard today, not a single person has mentioned, what city ordinance supports the special conditions that we put into the CO? Not a single reference to that. Not one. Nobody who's voiced opposition to it or Lee has said, our special conditions are based upon city ordinance X, Y, Z. Not a single reference to it, because there's not one. There is not a single city ordinance that says you can't sell beer and wine by glass, or that you can't have tables or chairs. Most of the opposition is to alcohol, and that's certainly understandable. It really has nothing to do with our particular place. The restaurants across the street are vastly larger than ours. So regarding the neighborhood association, Mr. Hayes said the neighborhood association opposed it. We've met with it, and there's been nothing but positive reviews from the neighborhood association. They haven't said a word to us about what we could do, for example, to improve it. I know y'all are under time constraints.
I just want to add a few things, just to clarify some stuff. First of all, regarding the sidewalk cafe permit, there's no definition of what a retail food establishment is under Charleston City Code or anything like that. That language comes from DHAT. And I reached out to DHAT and Jason Rowe, who is in zoning, prior to applying for the permit, because that's how I do things. I'm an attorney. And Jason Rowe told me, he said, listen, if DHAT doesn't require that you be licensed, you can still be considered a retail food establishment. I did everything he asked me to do. We submitted it and they approved it. They approved it for a reason. It's because we met all the requirements. If you read that ordinance, we very clearly met the requirements. I'll also say this, regarding some of the people that are opposed to us, a lot of these people really don't know what our business is. And I can tell by the way they were speaking. And they haven't been in our location. They haven't seen what we actually do. There have been some rumors going around. I won't name any names. But, I know that people have been telling other people falsities about our business. Like, for example, there's been a rumor going around that we got approved for 22 sidewalk tables. That's just not true. You've seen the permit, we got approved for 11. So a lot of people were upset about that, rightly so. And again, we were never going to put out more than 4 or 5 anyhow, so that's kind of irrelevant. But also, I've had people come up to me and tell me that certain people have told them that we've been operating illegally, like, for example, with the sidewalk tables. Well, we had a permit for the sidewalk tables. The minute we got a letter from Jason, or an email, it wasn't even a letter, we got an email from Jason Rowe that said you have to pull them, we pulled those. We did everything the city asked us to do. We always have. We plan to continue to. And I'll say, when the attorney for the other side mentioned that looks don't matter, well, they do, because how else do you classify a business? Again, north of 90% are retail sales in our store. What if we sell a hot dog, are we a restaurant? If we sell 1 glass of beer, are we a bar? That's not, there's no guidance out there. We really have to use ourselves. And I will tell you, regardless if we have sidewalk tables or anything else, inside seating or anything, it's never going to drop below 50%. If anything, it will hover around 70, 80% on my estimation. Because the more people that come in there, the more retail they buy. That's our goal. And as a business owner, I know that that's the most profitable thing. I don't want a bar. Our capacity is 12. That's it. We're a tiny spot. So, and again, when it comes to, traffic noise, I just reiterate, look at our certificate of occupancy. We can have 12 people in our store at a time. We take advantage of people that already are downtown. They're not coming to our business unless they live down there. We sell to a lot of locals. We sell to a lot of people that walk by our store. And it's the same thing for the liquor store next door. It's the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of tourists come down there. But, and I want to point out one thing really important. The tobacco store next door to us has the exact same zoning we have. They have an on-premise wine and beer license, and they're allowed to do what we want to do. And what I'm asking for is fair treatment under the zoning laws. They are doing the exact same thing, and they're allowed to do it. And they're literally right out our front door. And it's just not fair that they can say, you know, that, and I guarantee it, 90% of their sales are not retail, because they have a small section of retail. You walk in our store, it's retail everywhere. We have shelving, we have wine on the wall that goes up to the ceiling. In the back room, we have wine. There's no seating or bar or anything like that. It's just a misconception about our business. So again, I really appreciate y'all's time, and I hope that you can really see, and I'll tell you, all these neighborhood associations that say that they're against us, it's just not true. We have people here that live across the street at Printers Road in support of us. We have a lady here who lives in the first house on Rainbow Road, which is closest to our business. She has been our biggest advocate this entire time. She's lived there a very long time. And she, if anyone, is gonna hear any noise, she's gonna see any problems, and she loves our business. She comes in there all the time. She understands that that's not what we are. So, and you know, so for everyone to say that all those businesses are against us, it's just not true. I know over at the Elliott regime, when we pulled some pavers from the back courtyard area we have, there was a lady who came up. She's like, hey, where do y'all doing those pavers? We gave them to her. She was so nice. She came in our store. She'd never been there before, and she offered her support to us. So as you can see from the signatures, for every person against us, we can produce 100 that are for us. So that's, you know, everyone who's against us is probably in this room. So thank you.
Questions for the applicant or? I want to ask about the seating outside. So it's a retail establishment, people come and go. Why is there need for the seating outside?
So we retail food as well. So we have, so to give you an example, Callie Moore, who's a client of mine, I've worked with Callie Top Little Biscuit, Perry Moore, to produce a small menu of, you know, tea sandwiches, some of her chips and dip, things like that. So some people like to have a seat, have a tea sandwich, have a chip and dip, that kind of thing. So we like to offer a little bit of food. We don't have a hood, we don't have a grill, we don't have anything like that. Everything we sell is, you know, pre-made. It doesn't require a license from DHEC because we're not refrigerating stuff. You know, we're not doing anything like that. So the tables, the outside tables, it's people like to sit out there and have a bottle of water. It's not just alcohol. We actually sell during the summertime. We'll sell 100 bottles of water a day. That's how more water than I do anything. So it's not. This isn't just about.
There are a lot of retirees who enjoy Fifth Reaction.
And again, we got room for 11 tables. The most we ever had out there was 4. And we agreed that, you know, we were never going to put 11 out there. You know, and rumors started going around that, you know, we got an email that said someone got approved for 22 tables. And we're like, that just isn't true. And if that's why you're opposing us, you need to know the truth. And so we tried to do all that. We tried to cover all those bases. And it's just, you know, the rumors, someone out there is misrepresenting our business because they're opposed to us. And it's just really not fair. Again, I'm not a homeowner down there, but I've been on that corner for 15 years. I pay taxes as well. And Bernie owns the business. If there's any advocate that can be more powerful, this is the guy. And he won't say it. He's the former head of the Department of Revenue. I mean, he knows liquor licenses. So, you know, we're not doing it to have drinkers out there. It's really for people to be able to sit out and enjoy the weather. We have a small awning. People sit under the awning. You know, and that's all it is. So. And inside we have no tables. You know, we have a small table like this tall that when you have a glass of wine, you can set it on. We would like to have 3 leather chairs. It's not, you don't walk in and see bar stools, like that's not it. Literally, there's a room in the back by the fireplace, and there's 3 leather chairs and a confessional from 1800s really. Like that's what's it, you know, so.
So it is sort of like a combination retail wine bar, what you're sort of looking towards by requesting having all these outdoor seating?
I can see how you would say that, but I will say, you know, a very large portion of our sales, you know, I wouldn't say bar, I would say, you know, we start on premise. I guess there's no other word for using that, I guess, but you know, such a large portion of our sales are, you know, I've thought about, should I just reuse the space as a restaurant, you know, but Okay, I mean, 10% of our sales might be food. Am I gonna do that just to circumvent the code, just so I can sell by the glass, you know? It's not fair to us, it's not fair to everyone else.
Outside ones were important because there was nothing on the inside. Not
Yeah,
everybody's
exactly.
gonna want to
There's
stand
nothing
there and
on
look
the
at rows of wine bottles.
It's just a
They
small
want to do that in
space.
the
I
lot.
mean, it's tiny, it's very historic, it's the oldest commercial building in the state, we believe, it dates back to 1686. I've got pictures of commercial, I've got pictures that are 100 years old that show that building is commercial. I've got a picture of whiskey being delivered by horse and carriage to our liquor store. I mean, it's just an old building, and there's no space in there for any type of table. So that's really all we have, so.
So I need clarification from Lee right now, thank you. Mr. Batchelder, so Mr. Wilson stated that the applicant has not applied for the eating and drinking establishment, that they could apply, but they haven't. And I need more clarification about, I mean, it sounds like two different things. It sounds like a restaurant and a retail use, and that they have a permit for retail use. They've been approved for retail use, but they're wanting to add the eating and drinking component.
Well,
So I just need
yeah,
clarification.
that's true. And Mr. Maybank says that they have the same permits that these other restaurants have, you know, in the place on the corner. That's not true in terms of the city approvals. City approvals for those businesses allow for eating and drinking place, or from a building code standpoint, it becomes an assembly use where you've got people assembled who are eating and drinking. License as a retail business or mercantile use under the building code. And so he doesn't have the same permit that those have. And that's where we get into this issue, because he, I think, really wants to be more of a, maybe not totally a eating and drinking place, but certainly have a significant component of its business as that. And that's problematic in my view, that it's not a retail use.
So pretending that that the owner has just come to you and asked you if he could qualify for a permit for the eating and drinking establishment, restaurant use, would that be something they could do?
Well, again, the zoning of the property would allow that use, but they would have to go through the whole process.
Right.
To obtain zoning approvals to have that kind of use, which would require your approval, and the building code approvals to have that kind of use.
Right.
And they'd have to
So they could
provide-
go through the process as well.
They could go through that process, sure.
Thank you.
It just seemed like there is perhaps an alternate remedy that would afford them the opportunity to pursue business that they're seeking.
But I mean, I think that Mr. Wilson made really good points in regards to what the board is actually able to approve and not approve in terms of, you know, it not complying with the ordinance the way that it wants to be.
Yeah, would you want to pull up the certificate of occupancy?
Another question would tables and chairs be allowed inside if they felt like they have room?
Well, we had that discussion after, so this was issued December 10th, and I remember early in January of 2022, having discussions and email exchanges with Mr. Maybank and Mr. Sandy about that. And I said, you know, look, I'll remove that condition. And allow you to have some tables inside, or chairs inside. Because they mentioned having, I think, one or two chairs that they wanted to have inside. And so I was gonna amend it, but we never reached an agreement on what that amended language was going to be. And so I never changed this language, and this has been in effect ever since.
What's the date on their CO?
So there's an issue date at the top. That issue date is the date that they applied for the CO and certificate and business license. And our system does this, but the issuance of that CO was actually December 10th.
And let's drop that sign off. Here's, the sidewalk for the was.
That was applied for in May, I believe, May 11th.
Yeah, so it was actually, so they were already open when they made the application. It's under the CO.
I believe so.
We were. Yeah. I agree with y'all. I think there is a path forward. This may not be the way.
Any further discussion?
Well, this is hard because I have great friends on both sides. I'm a patron of your store. And, when I look at the certificate of occupancy, and I live in the world of certificate of occupancy, I kind of see that. And then I see afterwards, I think the business model was changing, the business strategy was changing. And I think there is a model by what you can achieve, what you desire on that. And my only concern is if we reverse our staff and in essence say, okay, the sidewalk permit should be good, we're probably sending the wrong message because that might not be the best process in the long run for your business. I personally enjoy your place. I enjoy the changes there. I think there's a better path forward to pursuing that and having more community discussion. But at this point, I think right now that approving or reversing is probably not the right thing. So I'm glad right now we made the motion to support that.
So Mr. McKay's motion is for denial of the appeal. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Rass. All those in favor of the motion, I'm sorry, before we move to vote, is there any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody coming out. I think that sounds like it will be really beneficial to the community once it's all resolved. And
All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? None. The motion to deny is unanimously approved, 5-0. Thank you all very much.
Hey Manny, this is my mother-in-law Barbara.
Never amended.
Oh, yeah, he did. I know. We're hungry now. So you guys think?
We would buy, what it is we always go down and buy wine and just beer, because that's all it is. Yeah, exactly. Have a good evening.
Well,
I'll take y'all there.
never mind.
Please take your seats.
That's not what
Thank you. Agenda item D3, 9 and 11 Elliott Street, Charlestown neighborhood. TMS number 4580903-101. Request special exception after the fact under section 54-110 to allow a horizontal expansion and vertical extension covered enclosure for pool and HVAC equipment that extends a non-conforming 2-foot west side setback, 7 feet required, zone SR5. Owner is Eric Roden, applicant Jonathan Yates. Mr. Batchelder.
9 and 11 Elliott Street is one residential property on Elliott Street. And this zoning map shows it's in the middle of that block between East Bay Street and BZA-Z. And it has two buildings. The main building is the residence, and then there's a detached building that includes maybe some residential space and I think a garage or storage area, something like that. And then you see this large property on the corner of Elliott Street and BZA-Z that now has a home on it. And after years of being just a surface parking lot. And here's an aerial view. Let's see, what am I looking at? I gotta get my bearings. So this is the large home on that corner lot that's recently been completed. And then this is 9 and 11 Elliott Street. And what you notice is each building has a 1-story addition to the back of it. And on the 11 Elliott Street building, there is now this platform, this enclosed platform for the pool equipment, the pump, the heater, filter, all that sort of thing, is up there on top of that roof behind or at the back of 11 Elliott Street. The applicant, the owner of the property constructed this platform, pool equipment, without city approval. They got a permit to install the pool, and the equipment was supposed to be at the back of the house on the ground, and it ended up on the roof of that 1-story section of the building. So they've applied for this after-the-fact approval, seeking your approval for the special exception to extend the non-conforming building footprint vertically with this platform addition. And they've worked with the owners of the property next door, the new home at 17 Elliott Street. It's the corner property. They've worked with those owners and their architect to come up with a solution which is before you tonight. So these plans have been prepared in response to trying to resolve the differences between those two property owners. And we'll just go through this. So you see, this is the 11 Elliott Street building, and then you see the pool back here. It's very small space, so they don't have much room to place that equipment. And what they've done is they've constructed this platform which extends over the building in this area. So you see the portion that extends down to the ground, and then it goes up and over that 1-story section of the building is located very close to that property line, which is the wall of the neighboring property. And so I've got better images at the end of this presentation to help you, but here you see the rear view. You see this structure extending up and over that 1-story section of 11 Elliott Street. And you see the wall right here on the neighboring property. And the east side of that wall is the property line. So they came up with an interesting design. This was what they started with originally. And again, this was constructed without city permits, and that's when we got called in, and since that time we've been trying to resolve that issue and work out a design that's that's acceptable to the neighbor. And so this on the right is what they've come up with. So they've extended that platform and enclosure vertically a little bit, and then they've constructed a roof over it, which in terms of visually looking at it, it looks like a roof. So it's framed as a roof, but without the actual surface material that would stop the airflow that's necessary out of that enclosure. So that's this looks like today, and that's it. So this is a special exception to extend vertically that non-conforming building footprint and slightly horizontally as well. Again, the issue with the special exception test in section 54.110 really deal with light and air impacts on neighboring property or properties. And in this case, and the aesthetic character of the environment, that sort of thing. But in this case, I think they resolved it. It will have to go through the BAR and obtain their approval as well. I think it is visible from Elliott Street. But in terms of the zoning issues, the light and air impacts have been resolved. And I do have a letter here that was submitted just briefly, just right before this meeting started. And this is signed by Deborah and James Trays, the owners of the neighboring property at 17 Elliott Street, which I'll be happy to pass to you.
So we didn't hear this before.
It was on the agenda, but it was never heard because it was deferred to try and resolve the issue.
So they resolved the issue with you?
Well, they
with the
resolved the
neighbors,
issue
or
with the neighbors at 17 Elliott Street.
They've submitted a letter in favor of the application. What is the city's position?
We recommend approval.
Recommend approval. Okay, is anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? We'll get to the application in just a second. Anyone in opposition to this application?
That's one section.
I would like to hear what they have to say first.
I would like to as well. So we'll listen to the applicant first, and then we'll afford the opposition opportunity to speak.
I thought we were clean for a second there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jonathan Yates, on Broad Street, Charleston. Unlike the previous applicant, we think Mr. Batchel is pretty good at what he does. We think he's very good. I'm here tonight, and I know the hour is late, so we're going to try to go quickly. And what we're going to do, I have my good friend Eric Roden. This is his house, and he's going to give you a little background to what happened this summer. And then we have his architect, Brian, who worked very closely. We also have our new neighbors, Trust. Babic worked very closely with their architect, Lynn Keys, to come up with a solution. But what I want to hit on first, when I met Eric this summer, life was good. He was moving into a new house. He had his new pool ready to go, and then all heck broke loose. He's going to get into it better than I can, but the pure, simple fact, and I love Lee, but he said 4 times in that purpose. Eric will stress to you that he hired a contractor, a pool contractor, his instruction and his agreement with them secure all necessary permits from the city of Charleston, and then commence with the work. It was a bit of a surprise, Eric, when we found out this had not been done. Eric's going to give you a little bit of that history, but he's going to brief. But one thing I can tell you in regards to our new friends, the Trays, not only did his initial contractors not do their job properly by the city, they can do it well by. You see that first thing? That wasn't what Eric was thinking about. Another thing is Eric and I talked about it. We started with good friend John Maslow. John sent me, because we cannot trespass on their property, we didn't have a good image of what you could see from their house. As soon as I showed that image to Eric, what the trays would see on that really botched job the contractor did. Let's stop everything. We're gonna bring Babbitt in, we're gonna see who the trades want us to talk to. We are going to fix this now. And it took us a while. You know, you say when you put a couple of attorneys in a room, you know, for a long meeting, 2 architects in the room, and see how long it goes. So with that, give you the background, because I'm permitting after the fact, all those bad things he said. I'm gonna bring in my friend Eric Rudden.
Thank you, Chairman, Board. I'm Eric Rhodes. I live at 9 and 11 Elliott Street, and I think Mr. Yates did a pretty good job of summing up how we got here, but I'll back up and give a little bit more context. I purchased the house, what year is this? Late in 21, and I talked to the contractor across the street from me, who's a very dear friend of mine, and I got an estimate for a bunch of renovations on the property. I was looking at a lot of interior renovations. Part of that project was going to be the installation of this pool and an equipment stand. I looked at the budget for it and I'm renovating an office building in town currently as well, and I said, that's quite a number. Let's hold off on everything, but let's try to get the pool. The contractor said, well, I've got you on the list with a good pool company, but there's not much sense in paying me 17.5% for them to come in and simply put a pool in. So it seems reasonable, I appreciate it. So as far as I knew, the pool had been permitted properly, and I do believe the pool is permitted properly. The pool company came to me and said, well, who would you like to construct the stand for the equipment? Contractor back, I said, do you have a sub that would be good for this? He gave me the name of someone, I connected them with the pool company, we came up with this. I knew as we were going up with it that something would need to be done on the side of the wall with the trays. And actually, we had reached out to Jim and Deborah over the course of that, but they were out of town and we didn't have a chance to talk. So as far as I knew, we were within the permitting, and I knew that something needed to be done aesthetically on their side to make it good for them. I get a letter from the city and realized, looking back through the plans with my pool company, that, I mean, there's no question that was not where it should have been built or how it should have been built. So I went to figure out what the best remedial measures we could take would be to make this aesthetically pleasing, as close to the zoning regulations as we could get, as safe and as good a structure as we could come up with. And I think we've got a fantastic solution that is in suiting with the neighborhood, that everyone, for the most part, is on board with, at least the people that can see it. But there've been a few accusations thrown around. I've read a few of the letters about me. I just want to back up and give a little bit of context for myself. I moved from Savannah to Charleston in the beginning of 2020. My wife left me and I fled north. I had had historic properties in Savannah in the past. I've dealt with a lot of them downtown there. I've never ended up in a zoning appeal. My first property here was 100 East Bay. It's the little white house across from Rainbow Road. When I purchased that, it was a horrific salmon color. I've been coming here since I was a child and walking these streets with my mom. I felt like the color of that house took away from the beauty of Rainbow Road. I appropriately requested and was granted permission to paint that house. I then did so. I then did the same at 9 and 11 area. I've done the same with my office building I purchased at 127 King Street. My architect for that building is in fact also Babbitt. We've appropriately worked through everything with the city. And I've done it at a couple more locations. As a matter of fact, the way I met Jonathan to begin with was he was opposing counsel on the property I'm constructing at Exchange Street. He represents Kay Bachman, who owns a very large brick house next to the abomination that my contractor has put up next to it. And when I found out that that was not necessarily permitted correctly either, and it was called to our attention, I walked up on the roof with Jonathan, much as I had the privilege of doing with the trays, as soon as this was brought to my attention. And I looked at it and I said, Jay, that was obviously not the bill of goods you were sold by the architect that did these plans before I ever bought into it. How do we fix it? We ripped the parapet off. We never fought anybody. We had a solution from everyone involved that was effective, and I was a good neighbor. I appreciate the historic fabric of this city. I know exactly where I live, and I understand exactly the opposition that's going to come if I do anything outside of the exact bounds of the ordinances and the law. Part of that is because this city deserves to be policed in that way, because if it isn't, then we'll lose the fabric of it. Part of it is a lot of my neighbors, for whatever reason, seem to have some personal grudge. There were a lot of letters written accusing me of wild pool parties. I think I cooked out twice for Georgia games. The one fall that I've been here so far, I'm certain everyone was out of my house by 6 p.m. because I don't really like evening guests that much. And I'm quite OCD about my house. I'm not really sure what's driven a lot of the letters in opposition. I moved into the neighborhood. I love the neighborhood. I've invited my neighbors over. I've tried to be just a part of the fabric of where I live. And the second that this was called to my attention, I've done everything I could to come up with an amicable, efficient solution. From standing in my backyard, a couple of the letters that were written questioned the structural integrity. I instructed them to use composite decking. It's not wood. It can't rot. It will never get termites. The number of PVC pipes that run behind that is fairly extraordinary. If there had been an easy solution to this that wasn't coming here in 6 months of architects passing drawings back and forth, I would have implemented it. There isn't. I can see standing in my backyard 3 or 4 other air conditioning units that are just perched on top of my neighbors' houses that look like if there's a gust of wind, they're going to come through the chicken wire into my yard. I can assure you that this is a very sturdy, well-constructed, aesthetically pleasing stand that we worked diligently with the trades to make sure they would be happy with from looking down on it from their beautiful new home, which I did. And the second I walked down and worked with them, I said, that is not okay. What are we doing? And we came up with a solution they're happy with, that I'm happy to modify this to get it to a standard where it's worthy of the neighborhood and their view. And I hope that the board can see the way to understanding that this was not any sort of intentional act on my part. I'm a lawyer too, there's too many of them here tonight. I know better. I trusted contractors. I guess I should have had a GC involved. Everyone was swamped, he backed out. I did the best I could, and now I'm here trying to remedy it in a constructive manner. And I appreciate you all hearing me and giving consideration to the application.
Simon, get you to come up.
Yes, sir.
It's up in front of everybody. Hi, good evening. Thank you for the time, the board. Just want to briefly talk about kind of how I was brought to the project and what my goal was in working with both my clients and the neighbors to propose an adequate solution. This is the image, I think, that shows it best. It's the view from the neighbor's property.
Even though these are on the screen, my principal job tonight, I'm a human weasel. So if you need me to come closer, you need me to pull back or go left or right, you just tell me.
I'm sorry, you're the architect.
I'm the architect, Bob McBride, architect. So I think, my client, Mr. Roden, pointed out this image to me and indicated the unfortunate view that his neighbor was going to have and just the need to come up with an appropriate solution that would remedy this. In considering the historic nature of the building, the hip roofs that are throughout both the principal structure and the accessory structure, and then even the kind of partial hips that are on the additions on each side. Working with Glen Keys, the idea was not to just create some sort of pool extension, but and I don't think that the rendering from the pool level shows it clearly, but really to introduce yet another hip roof structure. For ventilation purposes, for safety purposes, it does need to breathe, it does need to ventilate. There are combustible elements under there. There's heat exchangers under there. It does need to have open airflow, but we did come up with this idea of mimicking the roof structure. It has the same pitch, it has the same kind of look and feel of the existing buildings and the stepping. I think Glen Keys was very proud of this design, and much so that what I just understood this evening was that they replicated it for their own pool structure on their property to similarly cover their own equipment as well. So I think it did remedy the solution that we were looking for. We worked as best as we could with our neighbors to come up with an adequate solution. I do understand that there are some kind of existing issues of where this has been placed, but really the kind of siting of it, whereas might be inadverse in its current location, the alternate location would have the same visual problems. The pool stand has been raised up, but it's hardly to help the acoustic effects. When you build a pool equipment stand right next to a brick wall, you get a lot of echo and reverberation. So elevating that up kind of helps dampen the sound. It allows it to dissipate into the natural breezes. Finding an appropriate alternate location for this in the site would lead to, I think, additional problems and additional things. So we worked to develop a design that's both robust, sturdy, and meets everyone's aesthetic needs. And I think we're happy with it where we're heading. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you all very much. We're here for any and all questions, and we hope we gave you the context of the situation Eric found himself in. And now we do have support, our new friends and neighbors, the Trays, and we allow them to come up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Trace, and together with my husband Jim, we're the owners of 17 Elliott, which immediately abut this property on this west side. What we did work, our architect Glenn Keys designed the house, and as knows you all pretty well. He worked on the design of this, and we are comfortable. With the outcome. I think the ideal solution here would be to ask this to be moved 5 feet. I don't really think that would materially change what we would be looking at. And this seems like, a reasonable solution to us. Questions for me? I guess it.
Thank you. I was so glad to be on this project because this reminds me, I grew up in Charleston. Back in the old days in Charleston, the neighbors worked things out. They didn't drive war something crazy. We're here tonight with a perfect example of that, where our problem arose through no fault of theirs. We put the right professionals together to hopefully solve the problem for the veteran involved. So the system works. The system works sometimes, and there's a lot that we can accomplish outside of this room. But make your nights go a little quick. I know they pay you a princely sum to attend these meetings. I think it's still free parking. I think it's your compensation. That's all we've been here tonight. We're here for any and all questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Is there any opposition?
I just want to make a point. Can I stay here? Or do you
Yeah,
want me
would
to
you
go?
mind coming in, or at least announcing your name and your address for the record?
My name is Rainey Evans, and I live at 14 Beaton's Alley, which is sort of catacomb from this property. My greatest concern is that this structure exceeds the height of the wall, our dear historic 100+ year-old wall. And I think it's got to have some effect on that old structure. And it's very close to the wall, structurally on the bottom as well as the top. And you can also see it from the whole neighborhood. Those who walk by on the street, those who are close to it, whatever. I think that they made a wonderful effort to change things and make it look a lot better because it was really dreadful in the beginning. But I think they did a good job, and I think this is a good compromise. But I still like to see that structure come below the height of the historic wall that's between the Trez property and Mr. Roden's property. Really, that's, that was our beginning argument with it, and we stick to that. It should come down lower.
Thank you, Ms. Evans.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Cindy Wofford. I live on Elliott Street, immediately across from the little passageway walkway. I think it's always interesting when the lawyers lawyering up on a small neighborhood matter. It just means conversations. And I commend zoning, Board of Architectural Reviews for serving as the gatekeepers of our city. And it is a treasure of the city. So we always look at you and BAR as the gatekeeper. You get to look at all the details and the cases that are presented, and you get to choose what the fabric of our city is going to look like. And respectfully honor what we have, luckily, the fortune of living in a city like this. So thank you for your efforts and thank you for your visions for our. Collectively, all the cases that you see form the tapestry that is Charleston. And each case and each project is a thread in that tapestry. And if those threads start raveling or those threads change too much, the entire vision has a totally different outlook. What concerns me, not just this one particular project, but is pools being placed in areas that are too small. If you do not have room for the equipment in the pool, common logic is you don't have room for a pool because one needs the other. Otherwise, they are useless. Our one block in the last couple of years has had 4 pools installed. It is a small block. It is an intimate neighborhood. So I do, in every positive way, I understand pools are fun. And I also understand that we are a city that is known for our gardens. And if pools continue to repopulate all over the city, particularly south of Broad, we are losing the garden space for the pool. We are losing the shrubbery and the greenery that you don't want falling into your pool. So we are losing our gardens. And one by one, the city is changing as a result of that. Our gardens, we don't have protection and they can't speak at these meetings. So, thank you. I appreciate your listening and I appreciate your continued vision.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Anyone else in opposition who wishes to speak? Yeah, you have an opportunity to rebut.
Just very briefly, we thank Randy and Cindy for coming out, and we hope they'll be very happy with the invite, keeping in mind that you're not our best. This was going to be. I really think I'm going to pick a bone with Cindy. It's pretty darn hot here in the summer. I love having fun with the pool. So keep it in mind, we're all living in a tight space in an aging surgery city. We need to work together, and this today is a good thing for the folks working together to come out with a good solution so everyone can walk away happy. One thing, and Rainey talked briefly about not exceeding the height of walls. I take it back to what Havoc very clearly talks to you about sound dissipation. When you put that kind of equipment right next to the brick wall, it creates what we call an echo chamber, and that's not too common for us. So you put the elevation for sound dissipation. And in this case, if you look at the requirements for this special exception, most of them we below right here. No impact on vehicle or pedestrian safety. Final impact. Aesthetic character of the environs include possible need for screening from view. That is what we've done here. The first attempt, often, we've never. When we put the two good guys together, Havoc and Glenn, they came up with a good way to screen this from view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. We'll close the public portion unless there's anybody else.
I just have one question. So the height that's shown on the right-hand photograph is the height.
Yeah, this was
So
the.
that is wrong. So that's the correct height over here.
This
But
was
the
the.
design is what I'm saying.
This is what it can be approved by the DAR.
But the roof is gonna be,
The way it's designed, you have to look at the aerial to see the roof. The roof is louvered to allow the ventilation to the equipment. So it gives it that free roof line, it's all louvered, so the air can get through with the equipment. And also the sound can be directed up. So it's twofold.
See the frame only, but
and how
not
far
the
above
sheet.
that wall is that? I mean, I'm sensitive to the comments about the height.
Well,
I understand what you're saying about the noise, but.
You have to put in context, this is their principal road, this is our house garage dependency. we kept it under, the two architects were able to keep it under E. As you see, this building goes the whole way down it, right along that wall. This building is even higher. So the work was to create a sound battery, to mask the equipment. Smaller than the E, but that hip roof right there.
Must not be a very big pool.
He's not a big guy. He's not a big guy.
And I don't have many friends like this.
So we did receive a lot of letters in opposition. Do you feel like, based on your comments, I'm assuming about light and air impacts and aesthetic character of the environment, that, and you're recommending approval based on those, that you feel like all of that's been addressed?
I believe they have worked hard and come up with a good solution.
And this does have to go before BAR as far as the design and height, so.
Yeah. And thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. McKay moves for approval. There a second? Grass seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? None. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item B, number 88 Society Street, the Ansonboro neighborhood, TMS number 457-04-025 and 113. Request special exception under section 54-220 to allow 50-unit accommodations use in an MU2 WH mixed-use workforce housing zone district. The owner is GS LLC Acquisitions LLC and Brian Hellman Yates, PA. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a proposed hotel between King and Meeting Street on the north side of Society Street. And the zoning map highlights the portion of the property that we're talking about. It's actually 2 TMS numbers today. And it's an odd-shaped piece of property, but it fronts on Society Street right here, and it's part of a larger development that will stretch all the way to George Street. This is the existing condition. It's mostly a surface parking lot. There's a one-story building on the south end. The front portion of that building will be preserved and incorporated into this hotel building. This has been in the works for quite a while. And it took them a while. They actually started with the BAR because they sought approval for additional height above the 6-story height district, which they're entitled to seek through the BAR with the BAR's approval. It took them a while to get through that process, but I think they've come up with a beautiful building and very interesting way to develop the property. So this is the application for the hotel special exception. So they've submitted their written response to all the special exception requirements, and we believe they meet all those requirements. So I'm not going to go through these in any great detail. Be happy to answer any questions if anybody has them, but our traffic transportation department has reviewed the traffic study and the aspects of these conditions that deal with traffic, and they've determined that this application satisfies their requirements. The design, as I mentioned, incorporates the 1-story building, which is shown right here, into the new building. and includes some residential units as well on certain floors in this building. But if we go through the site, these are existing conditions. I'll just quickly go through this to explain. Of course, that's the analysis of the uses within so many feet and the bus routes. So the site includes a parking level below grade, and part of that parking level will include the parking for the hotel under the hotel section of the property, and then at grade there will be two buildings, one being the hotel building on Society Street with some residential units, and then the other one being mostly residential, and having parking incorporated into the building. And the applicant can explain that in a little bit more detail, but so these are the floors of the hotel building. Just very briefly, this is the ground floor showing meeting space and a restaurant and a bar space on the ground floor, as well as lobby and back of house spaces. Then I can't read these floors on these plans, so that's level 2, second floor, third floor. So the second and third floor are hotel rooms. Then we get up to level 4, being a residential floor. Those are residential units. Level 5 is residential units. Level 6 is residential. And then the top floor, which is labeled 6.5, is this is the additional floor that the BAR approved. And it includes some hotel rooms, as well as restaurant, bar space, indoor and outdoor, and a pool. And you can see how the upper floor is set back from Society Street and set back from the neighboring properties as well. And rooftop plan. So in elevation, here's the proposed building. And just for your information, this is the one-story building on Society that's being preserved. So you see how the front facade of the new building is set back. More images. Oh, that's it. So that is the plan. And this does the best job, I guess, of giving you the idea of what that's going to look like on Society Street. Those are the plans. Again, I think they've addressed all the special exception requirements. So my recommendation is going to be for approval. And I know that they were working with the Historic Ansonboro Neighborhood Association to come up with an agreement with them as well. And I'm going to give, let's see, 4, 5. So I'll give those to you if you would pass those around. This is a letter or a memo that states the conditions that they've agreed to. And this is from the developer of the project. See, it addresses a number of things. And then at the end, it says, it's our understanding that these conditions are made, if these conditions are made a part of the accommodations use special exception approval, HANA will not oppose the application to allow 50 sleeping unit accommodations use at the south building. To that end, GSA, which is the developer owner, provide a copy of these conditions to the Board of Zoning Appeals and respectfully request the board incorporate these conditions as part of their approval. So I'm recommending that you approve this and make this letter and the conditions that are stated in this letter a condition of the approval.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelder. So the city's recommendation is approval with conditions as outlined in the letter.
Right. That is correct.
Okay. Is anyone here in opposition? I will hear from the applicant. they have any presentation they'd like to share with us.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Brian Hellman, 105 Broad Street, here on behalf of GS Acquisitions LLC, who's proposing this development. This, as Mr. Batchelder mentioned, has been a long process for us to get to this point. This is actually our sixth public meeting for this project. The first time at the Board of Zoning Appeals, but we've been through the Planning Commission, through City Council to modify the zoning. There's a workforce housing component, a part of the housing units that are being proposed. So we rezoned the property into a workforce housing MU zoning district. So that was our first stop, as Mr. Batchelder pointed out, because there's that 6.5 floor. It goes unusually to the BAR before it comes to the BZA. So we've had plenty of opportunity to speak with our neighbors, interested parties, historic groups, preservation groups, and Anson Borough has been extremely proactive in this process. An early supporter of the project, they basically had some really good ideas for us and some that made into this document, outlining conditions upon which they would support it. One of the conditions, the last condition that makes it in here actually comes not from Anson Borough, it comes from the Mickey Group. And the Mickey Group is maybe a group that appears before you from time to time, but it's the Middle King Business District Group. And it's really comprised of the people, the businesses that sort of fall along King Street, sort of down here and over. And a number of those businesses currently utilize this parking lot, a parking lot that I can remember using for pretty much my whole life, going to Dumas or Max's Men's World and others. But they had some concerns about the potential loss of parking that would occur as a result of this, even though, interestingly, some of those store owners were sellers of the parking lot that created all this property. And so what came out of those conversations is another one of these items that we proposed be a condition if the board were so inclined to approve this project tonight, and that's that 70 of our parking spaces will be in excess of what is required by zoning. So a lot of times you see people, you saw some tonight who were here asking for variances to provide less parking than the ordinance requires. Here, we're going to be providing at least 70. It's probably more than that, except that once engineering goes through, you sometimes lose a parking space or two because of the placement of a column. But we feel very comfortable that it will be at least 70 parking spaces, and that's what we shared with our neighbors. And so those spaces would be publicly available for really, I think, a first from a retail standpoint on King Street to be valet parking for retail business use. And I know there are some for restaurants. I'm not familiar if there are any for retail, but we're pretty excited. Our neighbors were excited about that too. I think some of them wrote some letters in support of this project because of that nice convenience that will come out of this project to allow people to drop off their car and not circle parking decks to find parking. So in any event, back to the hotel proposed development. One of the things that you see here is, here's Society Street, the existing historic facade that's being preserved, the mixed-use project, and that's actually key because one of the elements of the test is that we've created a mixed-use environment, and this is a very mixed-use environment. We've got, this building alone has accommodations units, it has residential for sale condominium units, and it has a restaurant facility on the ground floor and a smaller restaurant facility on the upper floor. The pickup and drop-off back here, which is accessed from George Street, and then the other building that you saw, if we could step back to that, this building here will be mostly residential apartments, and that's where the residential rental apartments as well as the workforce residential housing will be housed. And then some restaurant and retail spaces fronting George. And you'll see that the ingress
comes from George Street, and the pickup and drop off for the hotel is not on one-way Society Street, but it's actually utilizing the rear of the property. So the pickup and drop off can occur here, as well as we've got pickup and drop off for the valet parking for King Street that would occur up here. And then moving back around to egress back on the George Street. I can certainly understand it's been a very long evening for all of you. I can walk through each and every one of these items if you have any questions. As I said, we've been working really hard to not fill the room tonight. And so I've been answering questions. With me is Tony Giuliani and Gary Goff, who designed this beautiful project, and they can walk through it as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hillman. Any questions? Lee, I have one question. I'm curious about the differences between items 1 and item 4. Item 1 specifically, for those who, well, and Mr. Hellman, just for your sake, item 1 says no amplified live music to be performed in the exterior areas of level 6.5. Item 4 says any amplified music in outdoor areas shall cease by 11 p.m. And I was just curious, only because I can't tell from here what other outdoor areas exist besides the top level of 6.5.
it's really the top level 6.5 where we're talking about, and there are 2 elements. I was actually a little confused about that at first myself. And as it was explained to me from Angela Drake, chair of ANA, no amplified live music at all. So if there's live music, a person playing a guitar, they're playing an acoustic guitar, they're not playing guitar with an amplifier. There can be, and they model this after the Bohemian Hotel on Meeting Street, there can be speakers, for instance, on the that level 6.5, but any music amplified ceases at 11 p.m. So that would be, through speakers as opposed to live music.
I think I understand now. So it seems like the discrepancies between live music versus pre-recorded or just other.
Exactly.
Not sure that most people would recognize the difference between whether live music is being played or whether a DJ is playing music, or even if it's just background music.
I think they were concerned that there would be, a guitar player with an amplifier or a keyboard and all of this with amplifiers. That was their concern, that would be louder than, say, just a person playing an acoustic instrument or with a violin or a guitar, as opposed to just, some speakers around the pool or something like that.
Typically for these rooftop venues, we've done what we've seen in a lot of other cases has been not strictly amplified music, but not typically just amplified live music, but any amplified music. That creating that restriction for all rooftop locations. So to my line of thinking, I don't know, again, I still don't see quite the discrepancy between why anybody, whether it be live or otherwise, why it would be permitted on the rooftop in general.
So this was actually modeled after the Bohemian Hotel, and those were the same restrictions that they agreed to at ANA, and that seemed to work pretty well. Number 6, and it's also in the plans, there's actually, it's hard to see, and especially if we could go back and maybe Tony, you could speak to this. I understand there's also an acoustical consultant that's going to be engaged, and there's some glass or some feature that's going to also keep sort of sound and wind down and in.
So according to, it's in on the drawings here as well as note, it's also limited to VAR. We're hiring a sound consultant and we'll do our testing, engineering, and then that will determine how high the decibels need to be. Yeah, like the word 6 stories up.
So much like Mr. Yates is sending the sound upward, the wall effectively do the same thing. And again, modeled after the Bohemian, that
the neighbors seem to be supportive of that type of design, where there could be music, but not to a degree that would disturb anybody.
It's great that you got a component of workforce housing, that you're able to kind of work that in.
The hotel is actually very helpful in that, because it does two things. It sort of is one of those highest and best uses from a cost standpoint, but it also provides for the ability to do the valet parking, which all of these things combined, with the valet parking, we can tighten the parking spaces, which allows the architects to create more space so that in a valet parking situation, they can stack cars. You can't do that but by stacking cars, they can effectively create more space that allows the workforce housing to be created. So all of these pieces, this process we've been working on now I feel like it's been 3 years-ish to get to this point. There's so many variables and moving pieces to get all of this to work, so that things like workforce housing take valet parking to stack cars to create basically that additional area. Just kind of found space to make it work. It's not easy. It's not easy to develop in the city of Charleston, particularly in infill spaces surrounded by historic buildings.
Mr. Batchelor, do you have any other, I guess, sorry, and I apologize to circle back on the sound thing. It's just something I've been thinking about. I'm inclined in item 4 to replace amplified music with amplified sound. I know that's a minor change, but I think it points to anybody using a microphone, or perhaps other events in which somebody would be speaking into a microphone. I'm just curious if you have any objections to that modification.
I think that's completely within what's intended by this one, for sure. There's probably more artful than drafting that we presented here.
I'll move for approval with the conditions outlined 1 through 7, and making the change to number 4, any amplified sound in outdoor areas shall cease by 11 p.m.
So the motion is for approval with conditions as just outlined. I'm not going to repeat them because they're clearly stated. Thank you, Ms. Grass. Is there a second?
Second, I'll second.
Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. None. The motion is unanimously approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for sticking with us. This is a long one. Last item, B5, 29 Gadsden Street, Charleston Village, TMS number 457-03-03026. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow a 2-story piazza with a 10-foot 4-inch south side setback, 12 feet required, zone STR. The owner is Gregory Jackson. Applicant is Joseph Rubenstein. Is that correct? Thank you, Mr. Batchelor.
So this is an easy application, finally. This is a residential property in Charleston Village, just south of Montague in Gadsden. And from this aerial view, one thing you'll notice right away is that this house, the subject house, does not have the south-facing piazza like the 3 houses to the south, which are basically identical houses to this house. And so what they're proposing to do, and this view does a good job of showing 2 of those houses to the south, is to build back a 2-story piazza in that space. So this is the site plan, and by doing that, they will not lose the right to have their 2 parking spaces. that driveway will still be wide enough. And in these plans, and I'll just skip right to the elevations. So you see the elevation right here of what that will look like once it's located. So that's the request before you, is just to allow the setback variance to allow that piazza to be rebuilt. And we recommend approval.
City recommends approval. Thank you, Mr. Batchelder.
Let me just point out that this is a property that has a historic Charleston Foundation easement, and they have approval.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. Anyone here in opposition, I have to ask. We'll hear from the applicant if you have anything you'd like to add to Ms. Batchelder's presentation. I do have one question. I'm just curious.
Yes, sir.
Was there originally a piazza that was removed?
So I'm still trying to figure that out. I've heard conflicting things. I don't think it was. So getting to the end of that there, it looks like it's got that same indentation where it could have been, but I don't think it was ever removed.
Okay, thank you.
The piazzas are, you know, they were built for the breezes and all that kind of great thing.
Yes, sir.
And I was thinking, if we looked at the old maps, you probably would have had porches on there. People created more space for carriages back in the day or whatever. They wanted to be different. But thank you for wanting to put the piazzas back on, because as somebody stated at the meeting earlier today, that's the historic charm, the character. You're adding value. You're adding more value than what you're gonna think you're gonna have by giving it the look that it was supposed to have, and it's gonna be pleasing, very pleasing to the eye. So thank you for doing that.
Is there a motion?
Make for approval.
I'll second. Ms. Crafton, Mr. Goodwin seconds.
Who's second?
Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you.
I was worried I didn't bring
All
my
those in
lawyers.
favor, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It is unanimously approved. Thank you very much.
No, thank you
You've
all.
had the details. You have to have the long story.
Thank you. Long day for that.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Very nice to meet you.
The Sanborn maps would probably have, the Sanborn maps would probably have
Passed it or
your
not?
houses. Sorry. Sanborn maps at the library they might have.
You can actually get those online. You can go online and just type in.
Very little on 29.
That's
Every other house around there, I've got a ton of information.
Oh, really?
Very little. But thank you all.
Thank you.
There's no other business, so the meeting is adjourned.